Laura, we are live.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Techsommet's AI and the Next Era Contact Centers. I'm Laura Ziegar, Contact Center and CX Transformation Consultant, founder of Vibe Management, and creator of the Quantum CX MRI framework. I'll be your moderator today as we explore one of the most pressing questions facing contact center leaders. How do we harness AI to improve customer experience without losing the human touch that builds trust and loyalty? Before we begin, I'd like to extend a special thank you to our tech partner, ASAP, for making today's event possible. Their support enables us to bring together industry experts and create these valuable learning opportunities for the contact center community. Today's agenda brings together industry experts who are navigating this transformation in real time, from reimagining agent roles to safeguarding trust in an AI-driven world. We'll kick off with a fireside chat, followed by a powerful session and two panel discussions that tackle the biggest challenges you're facing: workforce transformation, AI ROI, security, and the future of intelligent CX. Let's dive in. Our first session is a fireside chat titled "It's Not Me, It's You: Breaking Up with Legacy CX and AI That Doesn't Deliver." Joining me is Chris Arnold, VP Contact Center Strategy at ASAP. Chris, welcome. Let's get started.
Hi, Laura. Thanks, and welcome everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Maybe I'll start with a little bit about me, my background, just so that everybody can kind of understand where I came from. I started as an agent on the phone. It's been 25 years ago now, not to date myself, but that gave me an opportunity to walk quite a few miles in these very tough shoes. Working in a contact center while I was in college gave me a very real perspective of how challenging customer service, which we know, customer service is a very big part of CX, and having walked a few miles in those shoes, and then I think over 20 years working for Alltel and then Verizon. Verizon purchased Alltel back in 2008, 2009, and I was part of that acquisition. And so I had an opportunity to work in virtually every aspect of the contact center, all of the frontline operations, back office operations. The last role I had at Verizon was managing all the contact center technology for about 50,000 desktops across the globe. And that's how I became introduced to ASAP. As an ASAP customer, I'd seen the technology up close and personal. And I've now had the opportunity to spend the last 6 years working in this AI space. And maybe a minute on ASAP for those of you who are not familiar with what ASAP does. We've been around for over a decade now. And we really started as what we would call an AI native company. Put together a research group, PhDs working in artificial intelligence, pretty unsure where we were going to apply the artificial intelligence. But our founder recognized that customer service, or the customer journey, customer experience as a whole, was largely broken. It was born sort of out of a really bad experience he had with his cable company. And so out of that, we set out on a mission 10 years ago to help make customer service better. And ever since then, we've sort of continued to evolve. And now more recently, we've launched the customer experience platform, which is a combination of all of these AI native features. And it's really everything. It's the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today. And it's really these capabilities that are going to help us leapfrog and do a lot of the things that the former technologies haven't done.
Chris, between your 2 decades running contact center strategy inside large enterprises and my work helping organizations transform CX from the inside out, we've both seen wave after wave of AI breakthroughs come and go. From your perspective, what feels fundamentally broken in contact centers today that all those earlier investments never quite fixed?
Yeah, gosh, I could go on about this for days. And honestly, going all the way back to my days as an agent on the phones, there's a lot of things that haven't changed in those 25 years. The contact center space, which we know is just a sort of one slice of the CX pie, still deals with tremendous amounts of agent absenteeism, attrition. Many enterprises are still on that treadmill of trying to replace human agents. And so that creates systemic issues where all of the new hires coming in, they're not experts, and so the customer experience is negatively impacted because of their lack of expertise. I see largely they still haven't figured out how to bring all of the tools together in this very complex, large scale enterprise that still has a lot of humans and everything that comes with humans as part of it. And so you think about legacy technologies like CRMs and IVRs and what we would call chatbots. These things have come together to try to improve the customer experience. But largely what's happened is the customer journey is still very fragmented. It's still very filled with friction. And these are things that have been around for 2 decades. So we've thrown a lot of new technologies as those technologies have emerged. We brought in websites and mobile apps and automation inside that IVR, or we've tried to do more and more with chatbots. And what has really ultimately happened is we as operators have made all of these investments and the customer satisfaction scores have not followed. And so we continue to invest millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into these technologies, only to see customer satisfaction continue to go in the wrong direction. And it's because of all of the things that I mentioned. And we'll get into why I think, where we go from here is very different.
Great insight, Chris. And you have to add some thoughts to that. It's interesting. It's the customer journey and also the agent journey as well, that are mirroring each other at this point, where they both are suddenly getting a lot of tools or a lot of automation thrown at them. They're not quite sure how to deal with it in a way that really feels natural. And so it just creates that difficult experience that then ping pongs back and forth. The agent experience becomes difficult, the customer experience becomes difficult, and then they keep influencing each other. So definitely, definitely a challenge. When leaders look at their AI programs, they often point to deflection rates or containment as proof that things are working. But when you think about actual resolution, what do you see breaking down with chatbots, IVRs, and earlier generations of AI?
Hmm. Yeah, in a lot of ways, when I was at Verizon or when in, all of the different roles I've played, being an operator, I have been guilty of some of the things that I will mention where we sort of chase containment, or in the contact center space, we chase a lot of metrics, and there's a culture of continuous improvement. It creates a lot of pressure. And these technologies have not been focused on improving agent performance. These have largely been focused on reducing cost to serve. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a company focusing on reduction of cost to serve, because that really should be an indicator that the products and services that your customers are buying upstream actually do what you intend them to do. Anytime cost to serve goes up, it means there's something, friction or fragmentation inside that customer's journey that's causing them to require a lot of effort, a lot of, interaction with the company just to get what they paid for. And we as consumers understand that. And so I think what has happened is we've tried to throw, a lot of, say, self-serve tools. We've created websites. We've invested in different types of conversational IVRs, getting beyond the DTMF 1, 2, 3 decision trees. We've invested in chatbots, all the things I mentioned before. We continue to invest more and more into CRMs, all with the hope that it will reduce cost to serve. That has not been the outcome. And it hasn't even manifested in improved customer satisfaction. And so we have to take a step back and say, okay, well, how did we get here? And when I work with enterprises of all sizes, largely Fortune 500, I see organizationally a lot of fragmentation. The people that are responsible for the voice channel are not the same people responsible for the websites, the mobile apps. You've got a different team managing the IVR, a completely separate team managing sales and marketing, and then not to mention someone else completely different managing agents, whether they're in-house or they're BPO agents. And this sort of organizational fragmentation creates fragmentation in the customer experience. So what I would like to see going forward is how do we address the organizational challenges so that that fragmentation doesn't ultimately create a fragmented customer experience?
And when organizations realize they're not getting the outcomes they expected, where do they usually point the finger first? Is it the AI itself, the data behind it, or something deeper in how the contact center is actually built?
Oh, wow. All right. So, not to get on a soapbox, but I do want to sort of provide some perspective. And this is perspective I provide my own kids. But you use the word blame. And I have just learned that as soon as we find someone or something to blame, all progress stops. And so I don't think it's helpful for us to find someone to blame. I do think it's helpful to find the root cause of a lot of these issues so that we don't sort of repeat the sins of the past, you might say. But to answer your question directly, in my 25 years of experience, many times, across CX, across the entire customer journey, it's really the frontline agent that tends to get the most blame. Contact center agents have been blamed for lots of things for a long time. You could largely say some similar things about retail agents in the stores, and these frontline people are your brand ambassadors. I would say 95% of them come to work every day trying to do a good job, but they've caught a lot of unfair blame for a lot of things that happen upstream from them. And so we have to figure out how to look at that honestly. And so rather than placing blame, which again, all progress stops when you find a place to blame or someone to blame, let's really identify the root cause. Let's look at this objectively and say, okay, over the past 2 decades, how did we get here? What has caused us to make all of these investments, no return on that investment in terms of customer satisfaction and loyalty? And how do we make sure, as we are at this inflection point with AI, how do we make sure we don't repeat those same mistakes?
We're hearing more about agentic AI as the next step beyond conversational automation. In practical terms, what does that shift look like in a contact center? And why is CX often the first place enterprises feel the need for it?
Yeah, for sure. And maybe it'll be helpful. The audience probably doesn't necessarily live in this world. So let me provide a little bit of definition around the difference between generative AI and agentic AI. So think of generative AI as your very talented writer. We're probably all using ChatGPT to generate things for us, and I think now that I've just seen my kids, they've started producing these memes. I don't even know what they're called, but they're these characters, and I think everybody in the world is trying to generate their caricature. And so this is the more generative side of the technology. It can write great poems and history, reports, and it can do a lot of things in terms of writing. Agentic AI is more like think of your agent as your project manager. It's the one that has access to all the systems and tools and knowledge bases and CRMs so that it can get real work done. It's really the marrying of these two, the generative and the agentic, that will help drive business outcomes. For, I don't know, I would say the last 5, maybe 8 years, we've been very focused on conversational AI because, prior to LLMs and the GPTs and all of these newer technologies, we didn't have the ability to achieve agentic outcomes. And so here we are, we have generative and we have agentic, but it's important to understand both. And the way ASAP thinks about it is we are absolutely responsible for helping our partners, the customers we do business with, drive business outcomes, real world business outcomes. You might call that containment. There's new levels of opportunity to apply automation really to 100% of your interactions, where we've been limited to a very small percentage of total interactions because of the deterministic nature of bots. And so now it's a whole new day and age where, things like the ASAP customer experience platform can bring all of this together into one location, one system, that's comprised of large models, medium-sized models, small contextual models, APIs that dip into knowledge bases and CRMs to facilitate these transactions. And all of this is very, very different from where we were just 2 years ago, where the limitations of deterministic bots meant that that technology was very brittle. So anything beyond paying my bill, changing my address, it tended to end up in a voice conversation. And this is where containment measurements have really faltered in the past. I've yet to work with an enterprise that was measuring true containment, meaning the customer started on this channel and they finished on this channel, first contact resolution. No, what usually happens is the people that are responsible for the chat program are measuring their containment without even looking to see if the customer interacted in the voice channel. And that's an incomplete picture. And it fosters this poor customer experience because organizationally we're set up for our own goals, for our own channel, and it doesn't recognize the real world customer experience.
For leaders listening to this, there's often concern about ripping and replacing systems that already run the business. What does it realistically take to move toward this model without breaking what already works?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's arguably it's the biggest challenge because there is no one size fits all. Every enterprise I've ever worked with had a different technology stack. It doesn't mean that it's harder or definitely not impossible. It just means everything is very bespoke. And the way I would encourage the audience to think about, say, the ASAP CXP customer experience platform is it is not a separate platform from your CCaaS, your CRM, your IVR, all the other things we already mentioned. It's complementary. It is a layer of artificial intelligence that is built to integrate with all of the investments you've already made, whether it's that CRM or IVR or even your deterministic bots. There's no reason to pull out a deterministic bot that's really good at taking payments. No, just have any deterministic bot who is unable to truly resolve that issue. If it can't resolve it, have it hand off to this generative agent. And so the difference is really now, instead of having to take out technologies, you can now add this layer of intelligence to make all of your other technology investments smarter. And there are examples, like I've been working with a customer here over the last year where we are fully replacing the IVR. It made perfect sense for them to have their customers just call the 800 number and immediately start talking to that generative agent. It's a great experience where you're no longer having to press 1, 2, 3 and go down a decision tree, get caught in a doom loop with a deterministic bot that really wants to help but isn't equipped to do so. So there are examples of both, but I think the best way to think about this is how can I apply an intelligence layer to my existing technologies to elevate everything that's already in the stack for the purpose of improving customer experience, you know, and getting back to really first contact resolution is a lot of what I'm talking about. Can't hear you, Laura.
That naturally brings us to what modern CX actually has to look like under the hood. When you think about CX systems that are built for agentic AI, what capabilities need to be there so leaders can actually see what the AI is doing, govern its behavior, and still move quickly without sacrificing trust?
Yeah, I think, we have to be very objective about the investments that have already been made, and nobody wants to go in and deal with the operational challenges of ripping and replacing. And I don't even think it's necessary 99% of the time. I think the real opportunity in front of us is to take bold steps to say, okay, here's how we got here. Kind of going back to how I started this conversation, we've done a lot of things to try to reduce cost to serve. We didn't do it intentionally to negatively impact customer satisfaction, but we haven't moved the customer satisfaction needle. At best, we're flat, and I'm speaking across industries. And so we're now at this inflection point where we can say, okay, we've got 2 decades of history that we can look back on. The last thing we want to do is create a modernized version of the fragmentation that got us here. So how do we have to operate differently? It involves a lot more than just the technology. You can take a great technology and put it in a broken process, and it's not going to deliver the outcomes you're looking for. And so I coach the companies I work with to really start with, how do we get all of the critical stakeholders involved? I mentioned all this fragmentation and the different teams that have their own sort of competing agendas and nobody's talking to each other. And ultimately, it's the customer experience that, suffers. So, how do we in advance? Because I will say, every boardroom in our country, arguably every boardroom across the globe is talking about their AI strategy. So, with that in mind, if you have a chief executive officer who is on the hook for an AI strategy, or maybe a chief customer officer, someone who's super passionate, obsessed about creating a great customer experience, you have to get C-suite level attention to your AI strategy, and you bring stakeholders from all the critical business units or departments in the enterprise, and you create a cohesive AI strategy. Because if you want to have a layer of intelligence that really creates a different customer journey, you don't have one AI solution for sales and marketing, another AI solution for the contact center. You got the website folks, the digital teams, the websites and mobile apps focusing on clicks, and everybody's driving their own AI strategy. If that's the path that the company chooses, you will end up with a modernized version of this fragmented technology. But if in advance you can bring together what I call this AI governance council, these key stakeholders pull together a cohesive strategy that addresses real world customer journeys. And this is work that needs to be done in parallel to forming this AI governance council. We need to map out customer journeys, not the happy path, not what we hope the customer's experience will be, but for every reason the customer interacts with your company, from the initial shopping experience on the website to what they hear and experience in the retail store, all the way through to when you're trying to save that customer in your retention department. Where are all of the friction and fragmentation points that create customer effort that hurts loyalty and will drive customer churn, all obviously impacting revenue, increasing risk to profitability? How do you stitch all this together? It's an AI governance council. It's mapping these customer journeys and creating realistic understanding of these friction points, and then asking yourself, what is the best way to solve this? How can artificial intelligence, both the generative and agentic versions, actually reduce friction and increase customer loyalty? These are the sort of the step-by-steps that I'm seeing. I'm observing the companies who are going further fastest in their AI strategies are executing on these steps. Now, I will acknowledge this does take more time on the front end, but as I have watched them deploy AI with these sort of strong foundational elements, I am seeing them learn and iterate very quickly. And it's sort of that flywheel, and they are bringing on use cases very rapidly now. So 1 year from now, they'll look very different than they do today.
From your perspective, what role does interaction intelligence play in a modern CX model when it comes to understanding customer needs, friction points, and emerging issues at scale?
Yeah, I think interaction intelligence is one of the key benefits. I will say it's probably more on the reactive side than everything I've talked about so far. But if you think about where we've come from, the quality assurance process in virtually every enterprise is the same now as it was 20 years ago when I was in the contact center. You have this sort of sometimes an army of people listening to 1, 2, 3% of interactions, subjectively scoring those, and then you sort of try to pair that subjective scoring of a very small number of interactions with customer post-interaction surveys, which also is a very small percentage of total interactions. And often those have a ton of bias in them because they're either super happy or they're super unhappy. So you don't really get a good view from either of these programs of what's really happening across your entire business. Well, with artificial intelligence, this interaction intelligence, you actually can have some visibility into 100% of your interactions with without all of the manual effort of these, large QA analyst teams. You have the ability to transcribe 100% of your interactions. You can glean tons of insights from, post-call summaries that no longer have to be manually typed by human agents. It's generated automatically. And I think most of the audience is probably familiar with summarization, but there's so much, I'll say, gold in those transcripts, especially when you're looking across 100% of them, because for 2 decades or more, we've convinced ourselves that we understood customer satisfaction and what customers were telling us because we were listening to 2 or 3% of those interactions. Now we're able to take this post-interaction intelligence and say, okay, what are customers saying? What is customer sentiment? Did they start the call happy? Did they end unhappy? What product or service were they talking about? Did they mention a competitor? All of this information is automated and it's brought to the surface so that we're no longer really looking for that needle in a haystack. We now have visibility into the entire haystack. And so you can use prompts similar to how we might prompt ChatGPT. We can ask anything we want of those transcripts. And what that will help us do more quickly is identify those friction points. Where is the customer effort too high? So we can be very surgical in how we go in and we address that, either with technology, it could be a process or policy change. There's a lot of different ways we might address these friction points, but the only way to have that visibility is to use AI across 100% of your interactions.
At the same time, most enterprises aren't starting from a blank slate. From your experience, how are leading organizations modernizing CX in a way that works across existing CCaaS, CRM, and back-end systems instead of trying to replace them?
Mm. Yeah, I think it goes back to what I think I said before about it's not just a technology consideration, it's a people, process, and technology understanding. And it goes back to, do I have all my stakeholders at the table? Do I have my customer journeys mapped? And again, these things do take time, but it's sort of what I call go slow to go fast. And what I am seeing happen the fastest in the world of CX, where AI is being applied, is that once I have an understanding of the customer journey, I am now able to figure out very surgically, where do I need to go attack that problem and what is the answer? And so it's not, I'll say, we've had for a very long time sort of this binary mindset, and I'm not 100% sure why, but it's always been voice or digital, human or automation. And I'm reminded in the pandemic, we had office work, work from home, and the cumulative effect of all of that has really been, okay, do we want to save cost or do we want to drive customer satisfaction? We are at a point with all of these technologies that I'm talking about, we can have both. It's not either or, it's voice and digital. The using the ASAP CXP as an example, we now can eliminate the fragmentation of these different channels because the AI platform has visibility. It has context across every channel. Customer starts on the website, they're shopping around, they hit the mobile app because they had to go pick their kids up from school, they make a phone call. All of this customer journey, all of these moments that matter to the business are now stitched together because you have a unified platform that has never existed. And it's generative, it's agentic, so it can think and act and reason. All of these things have never existed before. And so now is an opportunity for us to look, okay, well, what are the implications to people? When you think about most enterprises, the word on the street is that AI is coming for our jobs. You got to get in front of your people. You have to help them see that there's a different strategy. Every employee should already be using AI. Like virtually everybody on this call is using ChatGPT or some large language model for something. Every enterprise should have their employees on the AI train. And maybe we'll get into this, sort of in our closing, but the best AI strategy does not ignore the human role. It's not either or, it's both. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's the people side of it. You have to address the people mindset. You want everybody rowing in the same direction. And AI will only deliver on these promises that I've been talking about if humans are involved. Process, part of the customer journey. Where are your processes or your policies creating friction and fragmentation for your customer? Where is it negatively impacting first contact resolution? These are all threats to your customer loyalty, which is revenue, which is sending your customers to your competitors. And then obviously the technology, the ASAP CXP is an example where you are combining generative and agentic AI to create business outcomes that would otherwise be impossible. And on the technology front, I will say there's a lot of great marketing out there. Do your homework and really make sure that AI partner really truly is an AI native solution. It is that layer of intelligence that can elevate the technology investments you've already made. Otherwise, you will be ripping and replacing. So make sure you do your due diligence. And that kind of falls into that, laying a very strong foundation, go slow to go fast. It takes time to cut through all the great marketing out there.
Modern CX is about building systems that can reason, act, and be governed over time. The next challenge becomes less about technology and more about how organizations prepare for what's ahead. From what you've seen, what changes inside the organization are most critical to support this new CX model? Is it leadership mindset, operating structure, how teams work together, or all of the above?
Yeah, I think I'll take this opportunity to double down on the people side of, this sort of AI strategy because it's so easy for us to, again, have that binary mindset. Okay, well, we're here to talk about automation. That means no human involvement. There's no way I can reduce my cost to serve if I don't eliminate the humans. Okay, I think there will be some natural things that happen. We won't get into that. But if you want to have an AI strategy that transforms your business, you have to consider the people. So let's start with AI governance. Just a reminder that there are critical stakeholders across the different business units of your company. You got people that are responsible for digital platforms, you know, websites, mobile apps, and probably some other things now where you're trying to drive self-serve again so that you can reduce cost to serve. Totally fine. But those things have to work, and there needs to be some connection. When they don't work or they drive from the website, they drive traffic into a contact center for sales, a telesales, it needs to really make sure that it maintains that context. If I just left the website and I end up in a contact center, I want them to know what I was shopping for. And so, how do you create this seamless customer journey where there's always context? If I have to change channels, the company knows where I've been, what I've clicked on, what I'm interested in. It's not that hard. We've been chasing omni-channel for more than 20 years. As long as I can remember, omni-channel has just been a buzzword. I haven't encountered a single company that has actually achieved it. With, say, ASAP CXP, where you have this unified platform that works across every one of these channels, and it's that layer of intelligence that keeps the context and it can think and act and reason, you can now achieve omni-channel outcomes. And so how do we address the people part? How do we make sure we've got stakeholders at the table so that we don't create more fragmentation because everybody's chasing their own agenda? Okay, and then as you get to the contact center, instead of the mantra being AI is taking our jobs, which by the way, that's been around for a very long time. There's always something taking contact center jobs, and all of those deterministic bots didn't seem to do that. And so instead of having this doomsday outlook, we really have to get in front of those frontline employees, again, brand ambassadors, and really help them understand the role AI plays and let them become part of it. In fact, it's what they've been asking for since I was an agent on the phone. Instead of AI assisting the agent, which, 2 or 3 years ago, that's where ASAP was playing. We were playing in a field where let's go retrieve as much information and serve it up to the human agent in real time to make their jobs easier, which means reduce their average handle time, which means reduce cost to serve. Okay. But now instead of AI assisting the human, we are already at a place where the human can assist the AI. Let the generative agent do all the talking and let the human agent do what we do best, which is critical thinking, empathy, all of these moments that matter when you have a policy decision that, you know, may not look like what it should look like, in the policy compliance document. Give the human the opportunity to just evaluate that. And so instead of taking a 10 or 15-minute call, take 30 seconds and let them review the decision that needs to be made and how to respond with balance and empathy, which is what we humans still do best. And then send the generative agent back to finish the conversation, the agentic AI to do whatever it needs to do in the systems, whether it's change a price plan, give a credit, whatever that thing is, and then achieve resolution as a result. And you do that at a fraction of the cost. But you've got to bring humans along with you. And so the role of the human agent completely changes when it's now supervising the AI. Think about all of those quality analysts that I mentioned before. Maybe instead of them listening to and subjectively scoring 1, 2, 3% of calls, now they are using low and no code tooling to write these flows, to run simulations before this bot gets put into production in front of the customer. They can now run simulations. Again, all of these are capabilities of the ASAP customer experience platform. It's all in one tool, one platform, one interface. Let them run simulations instead of spending gazillions of dollars on 1, 2, 3% of interactions and then hoping the coaching changes human behavior. Actually make the changes to how the generative agent interacts with the customer once and for all. And then you can simulate it. And then on the back end, instead of having sort of great reporting, which has largely been volumes and AHT and those sorts of things that I mentioned, survey scores before, instead of having the reporting, now you can actually have the interaction intelligence that I was mentioning before, actionable insights to help you address these friction points in the customer journey. But it really does start with people. It's time for every role that I've talked about to evolve because it's leveraging AI. It's not about eliminating people. It's about really elevating the work that humans are doing because we are using AI for what it is, which is a tool.
For CX and technology leaders listening today, where should their focus realistically be over the next 12 to 24 months if they want to move in this direction without getting overwhelmed?
Yeah, I encourage everybody on this call only because I've observed large enterprises, really enterprises of all sorts of sizes, follow this almost playbook where it's first address the people side of things. If you really want to use AI to move, create the most value. And when I talk about value, I always talk about it in customer value, employee value, and ultimately shareholder value, which is really just driving these business outcomes that we're all on the hook for. And so how do you do that? Well, you need to make sure we don't repeat the sins of the past, which is start with this AI governance council. If your company isn't really clear on its AI strategy and how this layer of intelligence can apply to every leg of the customer journey, it needs to start with the C-suite. You need to get real clear from the top, the CEO, chief customer officer. Here's what we're doing. Here's sort of the North Star, which really needs to be customer obsession. And then I want every department head to form this AI governance council so that every part of the organization is rowing in the same direction. We've got one AI strategy. We've got one brain, which is the only way to create this seamless customer journey because one brain has all the context across all of these different potentially fragmented departments, potentially fragmented systems or solutions. So AI governance, get all your critical stakeholders in the room, create a cadence of we're all obsessed over the customer experience. And then really make sure, in addition to that, and in parallel, you've mapped out these customer journeys. There's no real way to apply this layer of intelligence in a way that will change outcomes if you don't understand where the friction points are today. Because I'm not talking about ripping and replacing legacy technologies, particularly the ones that are working well. If you've got a deterministic bot that is really great at taking payments and changing addresses, let it do what it does. But there's still tremendous amounts of opportunity to identify where the friction points are so that you can realize these leapfrog opportunities created by these new generative and agentic AI solutions. So it's AI governance, it's customer journey mapping, and then really make sure you're bringing your people. The human side of this for the next couple of years is absolutely critical. Every role needs to evolve inside the organization, and it's evolving because of how it's going to leverage AI and how it's going to assist the AI. And it involves, you really want to make sure you've got an AI partner that offers, say, observability. You'll hear a lot about observability and trust. You need to be able to see what the AI is doing and how it's driving outcomes or not. Where could it be hallucinating? All of these things that we're so afraid of. With the right platform, you absolutely can see these things and mitigate them before they ever become a risk. And so all these are capabilities that are ready today. You just need to make sure you do your due diligence and find the right AI partner, and then do not neglect the importance of the role of the human being.
All right, great insights, Chris. Thank you. We are going to go to a few questions. The first one, many AI failures are blamed on bad data. So what does good enough data actually look like to deliver value in contact centers?
Yeah, yeah. In many ways, the quality of your data will drive these outcomes. And so this is where I think the importance of several things. The data does need to be evaluated for accuracy, but the best way to do that, in my mind, is to run these simulations that I talked about. You'll have your technology team that will have access to create APIs or use APIs that already exist into systems. You have, like, part of the ASAP CXP is we have an API transformation layer. And what that transformation layer does, it helps us take what we would consider imperfect data and cleanse it, where maybe it's returning way too much information and it's so much information that it would confuse the technology, or we can add to, and so that transformation layer really helps take systems, like I think about knowledge bases and I think about CRMs where there's tremendous amounts of data. You call an API, it wasn't built for a generative agent to go have a conversation with your customer. Well, this transformation layer mitigates that. And then when you have these things in place, you have the APIs, you have the hooks into the knowledge bases where all this lives. You can scrape your website for FAQs. There's so many different ways to pull data back. You run the simulation and see if it's producing a reliable, trustworthy answer to your customer. That's the only way to do it. Now, I do think it's important for enterprises to look at their data. I see a lot more companies deploying CXPs or CDPs, customer data platforms. This is where we're taking lots of disparate sources of data and bringing it into a single location. Not everybody wants to make that investment, and that investment isn't always necessary. But these are different ways that you can mitigate what the question asked about is imperfect sources of data need to be mitigated. Sometimes that's making sure your knowledge base is updated. Sometimes it's using an API transformation layer. So there's a number of different ways to do it, but the simulation and the observability within the platform itself, within the AI platform, is how you make sure that you don't create bad customer experiences.
Right. Next question. Is real-time interaction intelligence critical at this time, or would you recommend starting with post-interaction intelligence and then pivoting to more real-time?
I lean towards the latter because it really becomes a question of priorities. And I think the interaction intelligence that I mentioned before, if you're starting new, you may not be doing anything with your transcription today. In fact, you may not even have transcription. If you start with transcription, you want to put some of the things I mentioned earlier in place. I think summarization is a fantastic use case because it's hard to find a better return on that investment where you're no longer spending 30 to 60 seconds on every call manually typing very imperfect notes that you do nothing with, by the way. So summarization is a great use case, but I think starting with historical insights will point you to the areas in your customer journey that need to be addressed, probably by teams upstream, whether it's sales, marketing, the product team. And that is a great place to start. And as you deploy more and more of your interactions to the generative agent, and your human agents are supervising the AI, you will start to see where the real opportunities are for real-time insights. But start with historical, sort of follow this order of, operations, if you will, and then you will see what meat is left on the bone for real time later on.
Great. And one last question. How does ASAP CXP practically create that shared intelligence layer across voice, chat, CRM, and backend systems without ripping everything out?
Yeah, so it really comes down to not, I don't want to get into a technical answer, but just know with the ASAP CXP, it's a layer of intelligence that has hooks into voice interactions, which it's a very lightweight integration that gives us access to the voice stream that allows us to transcribe everything. All the chat or hopefully by now asynchronous messaging interactions, they're already transcribed. So you take all of that transcription across all of your customer interactions, and it allows you to take action on what's happening in real time, whether it's using a generative agent to interact real time in voice or a generative agent to interact real time in chat or asynchronous messaging. That's the conversation side of it. And then I mentioned before, hooks into APIs, or APIs and hooks into knowledge bases. That's what enables the agentic side of it for it to think and reason and it understands the context of your business. These are the integration points that gives the system, which is a single unified platform, visibility into every voice interaction, every chat interaction. We have the ability to see activity on the website in a mobile app. And when it's all fed into one single platform, we never lose context. And so as the customer goes from the website to the mobile app to chat or asynchronous messaging to voice, we're able to maintain that context so your customer is never starting over, which is by far the most annoying thing. I don't have time to share a story, but it just happened yesterday. I repeated myself, I don't even know how many times to my mortgage company. And you don't have to do that anymore when you have this sort of unified platform across all those channels.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all the time we have for questions. One last question for you, Chris. If there's one shift in how leaders think or act that really matters as they rethink CX and AI, what would you want people to walk away with and start doing differently?
Yeah, I think it probably off the top of my mind, it is that binary mindset. I haven't seen a technology that can really deliver on omni, which, you can get into conversation about omni-channel and opti-channel or what I call optimal channel. You want both. And honestly, it's how do we avoid making the mistakes we've made in the past that ultimately got us here? It's by having a not an either or binary mindset. It's having a both and. We can reduce cost. We can drive customer satisfaction. We can create a unified customer journey across all the channels. When we bring all the right stakeholders on, we have everybody with a seat at the table with one mission in mind, which is to be obsessed about the customer journey. How do we leverage people, process, and technology to create a seamless experience? And ultimately, it's really going to come down to the AI intelligence layer that you deploy, and you really want to make sure you have an AI partner that understands your business. So I think that says a lot, but really do your due diligence. Find a great AI partner that's going to be with you along this journey. Don't be afraid to start small. Just get started. and then learn and iterate and watch that flywheel take off and your business transform.
Great, thank you. We actually have one more question that snuck in really quickly. If you were rebuilding a contact center from scratch in 2026, what legacy assumptions would you completely discard?
Hmm, that is a that is a great question. The first one that comes to mind is agents aren't the problem. Um, we've so often, it kind of goes back to the question you asked me about blame. We've so often blamed the humans, and we've created a very challenging environment for those human agents. So, as part of the people consideration, instead of sort of vilifying those human agents, we now have an opportunity to leverage this technology in a way that really elevates the human experience. So, if you are a contact center leader that believes customers can never be satisfied, agents don't want to do a good job, they really don't want to work here, um, disregard that. Set that aside and understand that if we deploy this technology with humans in mind in the right way, customers win. Agents are going to get what they've been looking for a very long time, which is a very, I don't want to say stress-free job, but they're going to have schedule flexibility. They'll have far fewer customers yelling at them. They're dealing with less complexity, less emotive interactions, and so they can play a very critical role in the success of the AI. And that's the front office. The back office, very similar. We can elevate a lot of jobs. So I would say really double down on how you evolve the role of really everybody that works in the CX customer journey space, and how do we all leverage AI to really achieve all these outcomes that I've been talking about.
Great answer. That's an excellent note for us to wrap up on. Certainly, I think that speaks to a lot of the leadership principles I use when I work with companies on AI, as far as really challenging those legacy beliefs and assumptions, as far as how the customer experience should work, what works, what doesn't work. So that's a great question and answer to showcase that. So thank you for your insights today, Chris.
Yeah,
We've
thanks for
all walked
having me.
away with some great information and excellent perspective on where to take the contact center into the AI world.
Yeah. Good luck to everyone out there.
Thank you. Okay. Well, next up, we have Jason Scott, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder at Start with Care Consulting, who's going to tackle a topic that's both provocative and urgent. Resistance is futile, the AI assimilation of the BPO. Jason will share real-world examples of how AI is already replacing traditional BPO functions, and more importantly, how leaders can adapt and future-proof their service models without losing trust, relevance, or people in the process. Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Laura. And hopefully everything I'm going to discuss here kind of builds off what Chris just went through. Um, this is something that kind of formed in my mind at the beginning of this year or beginning of, sorry, last year, and I've been kind of building it out since then. Um, this talk is not meant to be fear mongering. It's meant to be very pragmatic. Give me 1 second while I get the slides up.
Oh,
If,
yes.
if it will
And,
work.
and while you're doing that, our session is contact center, AI, and security and privacy, safeguarding trust in the age of intelligent CX.
All right, there we go. Let me know when you can see it and we'll kick off.
Great, we can see it.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. So again, I'm not trying to cause panic. It's not about hype. It's very pragmatic. Basically going to be talking about how AI is already consuming some of the work that BPOs have been relying on for a long, long time. And I think everyone on this call probably knows that. really focusing on those repetitive transactions, scripted support, volume-driven labor models, et cetera. Today, I'm going to focus really on those three things, mainly name what is changing. I'm going to leverage Clayton Christensen's disruption theory, if any of you guys know what that is. If not, I'm going to do a short introduction about how this is inevitable. And then we're going to get really practical about how BPOs, enterprises, and partners can pivot in this new paradigm to be able to survive without losing trust, relevance, or people. So let's get started if that's all right. Here we go. So for those of you who don't know, Clayton Christensen is well respected by me. He's one of my personal heroes. Rose Park Advisors was one of the early investors in a company that I was involved in called Coupang. I got to know his son really well. And once I started the job, one of the folks I worked with, the CEO of the company there, reached out to me and he said, "Hey, do you know the concept of selling milkshakes in the job to be done theory?" And I was like, "I have no idea." And if you don't know what that is, I encourage you after this to Google, milkshakes, Clayton Christensen, job to be done theory. But Clayton Christensen passed away, unfortunately, in 2020, but he's the author of The Innovator's Dilemma, Innovator Solution. He worked at the Harvard Business School and taught there for years and years and years. He's one of the greatest thinkers of our generation, and he is really the genius behind the disruption theory. Um, and you don't have to take my word for it. I've got a few quotes here for you. So Jeff Bezos said that Clayton Christensen is one of the greatest minds of our generation, not just in business, but how we think about progress and people or purpose. Sorry. Bill Gates, Clayton Christensen was one of the great business thinkers of our time. His insights helped a generation of leaders understand why disruption happens and why it's so hard to see it coming. And then these are my favorite two right here. Andy Grove, former CEO of Intel, said The Innovator's Dilemma is the most important business book of the last half century. And finally, The Economist, when he passed away, wrote that Clayton Christensen was the most influential management thinker of his time. So if you've been talking about disruption theory, or ever used that term in a presentation or a meeting and cited some examples, you're probably quoting from his theories. So I would encourage you to get to know him and read these books if you haven't. His framework turns what feels like chaos into pattern recognition. A lot of business feels every day like we're just dealing with the unknown, but he can help you identify those patterns in order to be to turn chaos into action, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So let's jump into it. So how we got here, this is the thought concept that kind of hit me last year really strongly, and I've been working on, which, I've been working in the customer service space for over 25 years, cut my teeth with a company called America Online. Some of you guys might be familiar. Once upon a time, they were a big deal. I started as a lowly program manager working on saves programs, for those of you who remember that. And we had a churn and burn model, and that was really the process that existed in the U.S. in those days. In the 1980s to 1990s, there was a lot of onshore, in-house, hire fast, fire faster, massive turnover. The call center in Oklahoma City I worked at, we had 1,100 agents, and we did literally 100% turnover a year. It was really the lowest common denominator approach, which provides lowest common denominator experiences. If you're hiring at the bare cost you can get away with, disciplining those folks out the door, you're just not going to get a great quality of work. And that's what was happening. And so, the issue is that we're always faced in customer service with that 80-20 split. 80% of our contact volume are known issues. They're things we've already got a solution for. We already know how to solve. Customers just don't want to either use the solutions that we've provided them, and they're going to ask anyway. And so we've spent the last 20 some odd year 30 40 years trying to solve this problem, because it's a huge spend. If I could spend that 80% of volume that I'm having to spend on support for things that I've already answered and customers can get access to on their own, I could put that back into the product, put that back into business, put that back into that 20%, which is new and novel and really needs to be focused on and addressed. But it just wasn't happening. And so to try to find and race to a better cost model, we started offshoring. I went to India and spent a lot of time in Bangalore early in my career, standing up a huge contact center for AOL. And then we moved to the Philippines. We tried lots of different options, balancing cost versus quality, trying to find ways to, one of the ideas was, look, maybe somebody who's in a lower, economic situation will be more excited to have this role, and they're going to be more diligent and answer better than, the lowest common denominator. So we offshored it, and it worked for a while, but it wasn't great, and customers didn't love it, and we basically traded CSAT for dollars. So then we said, okay, well, maybe we can go to nearshore, and that kind of blew up the rapid BPO expansion across the globe. And I've worked with all of those partners. And I think, one of the biggest ones in the world was Teleperformance, and still is, and they've only got like 8% of the market share. So if that tells you anything, that just shows you how diversified this market is when it comes to BPOs. So then, then we tried self-serve, and we were doing it throughout this, but self-serve just kept getting pushed. We're really trying to get people to, especially with the advent of technology, with people becoming more adept at searching. And this is when you saw a real shift. People were building help centers, and then Google comes out and people go, you know what? I can Google and get a better answer from a total stranger than I'm getting from the company's website. Microsoft was famous for this early in day. If anybody who remembers this, whenever you had a problem with Windows, you didn't go to Windows Help Center because it was so complicated and difficult to use. So you just Googled it, and some random guy would create a YouTube video, or you'd find an answer on a forum board somewhere. This actually had some success. I mean, we're all trained like monkeys now to reset our passwords using email, but there was a time, and it wasn't that long ago, where you had to actually call your bank to reset your password because they had to KYC, make sure it was you. But we've been able to introduce some of this, but it still didn't solve all of the problem. Then we tried bots, and everybody who's ever had a bot experience in chat, basically this was a programmed, question and answer response process where customers were forced on a rail to go down a line, and everybody knows what this is like, because you've typed into that chat window agent, 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 agent. So it just didn't get us there. So this has been a constant battle. How do we solve for this? How do we get this problem fixed? If I look back over the many years I've been doing this and the size of the budgets that we've dedicated to customer service in the various industries and organizations I've either been involved with or consulted for, it's a huge amount of money. And so if I could limit and reduce and take away that 80% that I'm having to spend on this and just be able to focus my time on that 20%, I'm a winner. So let's talk about that. Basically, this created what Clayton would call a real value network opportunity about core versus non-core work, and how the BPO became the go-to during this process. So really, with that 20-80 split, there was a different cost structure, there's a different incentive, utilization, efficiency, and volume, different performance metrics, AHT, SLA occupancy, and leadership focused entirely on the undesirable work. In other words, companies said, look, this isn't what I want to do. I don't want to spend all the time and effort having to manage this huge labor pool to manage that 80%. And so if I can find a partner that's all they do, that's their specialty, then they're going to drive this home for me, and they're going to do a great job. And that's exactly what happened. And you saw the creation of that all across the world. They were better at it, not because they were smarter, but because it fit their value network. That's what they became exceptional at. I used to tell all of the companies I consulted for, look, BPOs are a great solution for you, because when you get to a certain size and scale, when you have volume that you know how to handle, that's on a process that is scripted, created, and ready for an agent, you can pass that over to a BPO, and they're going to run that team better than you ever could, because that's their core competency. And really, that's what happened. BPOs were born out of that, weren't born, sorry, out of strategic love for customer service. They were really born out of a value network function. To dumb this down for those of you who understand the jobs to be done model, essentially customers don't want a quarter-inch drill bit, they want a quarter-inch hole. And really what customers in this case wanted was somebody to solve that 80%, and you guys came through in spades. So let's talk about how, because of the changes that's happened in just recent days, we're now facing a different wave of progress. And these disruption principles that he covers in his theory basically show that AI has now crossed three critical thresholds all at once. So let's talk about what those are. So first of all, typically in a disruption model, it starts from the bottom up. And what we've got here is AI is starting to reach good enough performance. AI can now resolve, not just deflect. Training becomes immediate. If the agents are saying the wrong thing, I can fix it literally with one prompt change. one and done problem solving. This doesn't take a huge amount of lift for me to change a process or a policy for my agent team. At the beginning of this year, I did some consulting for a company called Adminify.ai. They're based here in Lehi, Utah. They are working on creating agentic solutions for smaller to mid-sized companies, specifically in the home services space. And so imagine you're an owner of a small company. You've got several employees, but you're really an owner operator, meaning you're out there in the field doing the work that's required. And so you can't always answer that phone. You can't always have that customer interaction. So these guys have produced an AI that basically talks and acts like a human being. So when a call comes in and it's missed, it chats back to the customer, says, "Hey, we're sorry you missed your call. This is Cindy," based on whatever name they choose. "We saw that you reached out regarding tree services. How can we help you?" And then the customer can have a conversation with this AI agent, schedule an appointment, get an initial diagnosis, and understand what the service is going to look like or cost from an estimate perspective, and have a scheduled appointment before they even finish the chat. And it was so good that we were watching agents call in to their contact centers after the fact and ask to speak to Cindy or the other person that they talked to through the chat engine. And so we've seen that line now crossed. I don't know that we're 100% there on phone. You have all had that phone experience with an AI company right now, or someone using an AI solution on the phone, and the voice just isn't 100% there yet. So I think we've got some room, but chat definitely has disrupted this space already. Next, you have software economics, this threshold around economics. It's almost a near zero marginal cost per interaction. So the whole model is getting flipped. I mentioned the training speed. Literally their AI solution is set up in a way that you can change the prompt in natural language. You don't have to be a programmer. And so you can go in there and create change immediately. So if you see a hallucination take place, if you see the agent saying the wrong thing, the AI agent, you can literally go in, immediately change the prompt, and the agent never does it wrong again. Not to mention the fact they never call in sick. They're never late. They always stick to their shift. Humans scale linearly. AI is scaling exponentially. And so it's totally disrupting that end of the scale. And then finally, low end adoption. I mentioned this right at the beginning. I'm going to wrap with that right there, which is that, it started with work that nobody wants to do. AI is coming in and solving for that, and it's becoming a bottom up approach. And so as we continue to move forward and you look at these models, this is directly in line with the disruption theory models that Clayton has introduced. I encourage you all to read the book. So I love this. This was a quote I read. "Disruption doesn't announce itself. It quietly removes the reason you were hired." And we've seen this across multiple industries over the years. So let's talk about market indicators. You don't have to take my word for it. AI is already starting to gobble up the volume. Work is moving from human labor to software. So I'm providing references for this in the slide deck. You can go in and read these articles for yourself. But essentially, Klarna reported that AI chatbots are reducing headcount significantly for them to the tune of 700 agents based on the chatbot that they've introduced, similar to the discussion that we just had or the explanation I just made about Aminify. Then you look at like Google Cloud, right? Their support team, they're reporting that their bots have helped deflect 60% of misdirected calls that were not relevant to their sellers. That's a huge issue. Anybody who works in the contact center understands how frustrating that is, especially in today's telephony experience. There is so much garbage out there. You publish a phone number, you're going to get inundated with contacts. And so having the ability to rapidly detect what is a junk number, block and deflect those through an AI automatic process is massive. Let's talk about Airbnb. They rolled out an AI customer service agent to handle more queries without human intervention. There's an article, as I mentioned, you could read more about that and their use case. And finally, Lyft partnered with Anthropic for customer care and reported an 87 reduction in resolution time for handled cases. So you don't have to believe everything to accept the pattern, but the pattern is there. And so just becoming indefensible, the erosion of the BPO, the critical shift in value network. Here's the disruptor test. Does it start at the low end? Absolutely in this case. Does it win on first on cost and convenience? Absolutely. And then move into the mainstream? That's the way disruption happens. So it started on the low end, as I mentioned, and it's taking over those chats. But as it gets better and gets more efficient, it's going to start moving into voice and into all the other components. Now, there's a lot of discussion about augmented versus automated, and both of those are critical. And that's where you win. And we're going to get in that in the next slide. But What we're talking about mostly here is the automation of labor. And so we're moving away from labor into automation, and that is going to just cut those bottom lines that BPOs rely on. Now, the 20%, that's where we can win. And we're going to focus on that because as we move up, that's going to push all of that effort and opportunity into that space because AI is still never going to be as good as a human making a decision when it comes to critical components. So let's talk about finally the value network shift. Clients will stop paying for labor capacity and pay for outcomes, trust, and performance. All right. So let me talk about that real quick, and then I'm done, and we can take a few questions. How to survive disruption, the pivot, how you can become an integrated service and AI solution provider. The way that you're going to survive is you need to leverage cross-industry best practice, shift from labor solutions to consulting partners. And I'm seeing this in a lot of BPOs. You've been doing it for years. And BPOs are really good at this. Teleperformance started a consulting arm years ago. They started getting involved with customers at a deeper level rather than just doing labor work. The truth is, you guys, I'm speaking to the BPOs in the room, you know what a million different campaigns in so many industries look like. And so you're able to garner best practices across all those industries and trade them, pass those learnings back and forth. So you stand as a really great consultant. When I went to build teams in the past, I purposely hired from BPOs because I knew that those individuals know what good looks like. As I mentioned at the very beginning of this, that's your core skill set. And so bringing those people into your organization applies that core skill set and brings it to bear. So anyway, these are the things I think you can do in order to become survivable for this giant change in the world. Become the AI containment factory. And that means you need to start thinking about conversations, your knowledge ops, trust and safety operations, and agent enablement. You need to start partnering with those AI companies that exist. Make sure that you're embedding AI into everything you do, including thinking very strategically about AI automation and moving your existing labor pool into a more skilled and trained team that can do that 20%. Winners won't be the cheapest labor anymore. They're going to be the best operator with the most trustworthy service systems. So again, this is the model. If you want to get this right and redesign, this is the way that we're going to do it. Clayton Christensen warned that incumbents fail when they optimize the old model instead of building a new one. So this is my new one. Feel free to steal it. You need to have that front line of AI agents that are skilled and ready to take that 80%. Having a built-in escape patch so that customers, when the AI fails, can move to an augmented agent. And that is your hybrid. Your hybrid is your augmented agent. Now you've got agents that have all of these resources at their fingertips with an AI instructing them rather than having to search knowledge base articles, rewrite notes. It's automatically happening for them. And then you're going to have a specialist team. That's where you start to get really interesting. And now you're passing back to product and service learnings from the contact center that are going to change the whole way this works. And then finally, that finishes that product loop. So now you're spending that money on making your company better. And all of that is going to require a very strict governance model. You know, you need to always be constantly watching each one of these phases. So a PMO is going to be critical in your success. The shift is inevitable. The outcome is not. What I want to just close with is basically those that treat AI as a service operating system, not a feature, are going to win. If you don't restructure and rethink your current operations model and you try to continue down the same path you've been doing forever, you're going to rapidly realize that that work is going to dry up and disappear. So start thinking now about how do I pivot? How do I lean into AI? How do I become a trustworthy partner at administering CX with an AI solution? Any questions?
We do have one. As AI increasingly takes over routine processes, how can BPOs redefine their value proposition beyond cost efficiency?
Okay, say that one more time. Sorry, you came in a little fuzzy on my end.
Oh, can you hear me now? Is that better?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. It's just my speaker is a little weird.
Oh, okay, no worries. As AI increasingly takes over routine processes, how can BPOs redefine their value proposition beyond cost efficiency?
So that's what I was talking about in this process. So going back to that 80/20, that 20% is incredibly valuable. And the problem is it's been underserved for years. Anybody who's been in the CX space knows this. CS when I first started, was seen as a cost center. There was no value to it. Now that's gone through significant changes over the last 20 years in some areas, but it's still a more reactive than proactive environment. I've had to twist CEOs' arms to get them to listen when I've got not just data, but anecdotal data that backs up the data that says this is why this is happening. The customer service engine is basically the ears of the company. But what's happening is because that 80% is such a huge, massive volume of routine labor, as you mentioned, so much focus gets spent on it because it's so expensive. As that gets solved, the focus is really going to be on that 20%. How do we maximize it? I'll give you a great example, two real quick. One is at AOL years ago, we knew what our top 10 cancellation reasons were. The number three one was driven by a failing in our actual platform. And the CTO knew about it, didn't want to fix it. Problem was, it was $250,000 in man hours, dragging his feet. We don't have it in the budget for this quarter. We can get it to it in 3 quarters. I sat down, showed him, look, this is literally costing us $2.5 million a quarter in lost revenue from CLV loss, customers leaving the service. And suddenly now we're able to find the solution and solve for that problem. Those type of things where the customer service engine can come back and show the business, hey, this is going to solve the problem. When we launch a patch, and I worked in the gaming world for a long time, is living gaming system where it's always live. You push a patch, it's got 50, actually, when we launched Star Wars: The Old Republic, it had 10,000 bugs that we didn't know. Like, they were there. We knew that they were in there, but we didn't know what they were yet. So customers are going to report those into you. And of those 10,000 bugs, the vast majority are what we call a floating rock, which means there's a rock floating in a virtual world, and it's ruining the reality. But at the end of the day, it was a Star Wars game, so the Force makes rocks float. So, haha. But my point is it doesn't break the product. But there's those critical errors that we have to get fixed right away. And so it's training that 20%, training your workforce to be exceptional at handling those novel issues. So that's going to require you to become really closely entangled with the service partner that you're providing your BPO services to. So it's going to be a dynamic shift. It used to be a set it and forget it, a throw it over the wall. Hey, here's my problem, you fix it. Now it's going to become a very close partnership. If you're familiar with the live operations model that takes place in that type of world with like NOC services, et cetera, imagine a NOC, network operations center, that's outsourced, that's managing and watching the systems. Imagine the same thing that now, but for CX. So an integrated CX model where BPOs are the canary in the coal mine that are raising the flag when something's going wrong. Hopefully that answers your question. Laura, I'm over time, so I need to stop. But anything, if you got more, I'll do it.
Great. No, that is our last question. Thank you so much for
Perfect.
your BPO insights today. Very interesting. And we will move on to our next panel.
All right.
Thank you again, Jason. And
All right.
good morning.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Our next session is Contact Center AI Security and Privacy, Safeguarding Trust in the Age of Intelligent CX. In 2026, trust is no longer a brand value sitting in a slide deck. It's an operating requirement. Contact centers are rapidly becoming AI-powered ecosystems across voice, chat, and digital assistants, and they're processing more data than ever.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. Welcome back, everyone, and thanks for staying with us through the earlier sessions. We've already covered some strong ground today, and this next conversation builds on that momentum. Our panel is titled Human and AI, Redefining the Future of Contact Centers. In 2026, the practical question isn't, will AI be part of the contact center? It's how we design work so humans and AI complement each other without breaking trust, quality, or the employee experience. Over the next 45 minutes, we'll get specific, where AI truly helps, where it creates risk, what leaders should operationalize this year, and what it means for agents, supervisors, and customers. As we go, please drop your questions in the Q&A chat. We'll keep the panel interactive, and after the discussion, we'll open the floor for live audience Q&A. So let's bring in our panelists, each coming at this from a different angle. transformation, knowledge, and leadership. Let me quickly introduce our fantastic panel. First, Ajay Gupta, a contact center transformation leader who has led large-scale modernization programs across operations, technology, and customer experience. Ajay works at the intersection of process change, platforms, and people, exactly what human and AI is about. Ajay, a very warm welcome. What's the most exciting AI shift you're seeing right now?
Okay. When I talk about AI, what's really amazing to me, is the amount of visibility and insights the AI is, providing us about every interaction, in the contact center. So what it really means is, traditionally the leaders have used AI mainly for elimination, and assistance, in terms of bots and agent assist solutions. But now, they're beginning to use it, for insights and evolution. So getting insights and then using it to redesign, processes, right? And that to me, is the real difference where we begin to move from business efficiencies to business outcomes, right? Resolution, experience, dollars collected, more sales. And that to me, is really what the journey that AI is enabling for us.
Okay, next, Martin Hobrack, CEO of Cognita Knowledge Management, LLC, focused on knowledge management, intelligent content, and how organizations can turn information into a real-time asset for agents and customers. Martin brings a deep perspective on how AI can leverage knowledge in practical, scalable ways. Martin, great to have you with us. Your one-sentence take on AI's biggest contact center promise.
Thanks for having me. Really great to be here. In one sentence, I think really AI is the ultimate knowledge management tool. It's helping companies not only share knowledge with customers and agents, but also helping to collect and curate that knowledge.
Thank you. And finally, Jim Rembach, a leadership impact architect and president of Call Center Coach, who has coached and developed countless frontline leaders and supervisors. Jim is deeply focused on people, performance, and leadership in this new AI-enabled world. Jim, thanks for joining us. What is keeping leaders up at night about AI?
Well, what's keeping leaders up at night really depends on where you are within the organization. So what's keeping leaders up at night isn't AI itself. It's accountability and control. So at the senior level, there's pressure from up above to get AI into the business quickly, but uncertainty about how to do it without risk it is really the thing that's top of mind. They know that moving too slowly or too quickly puts their jobs on the line. So middle managers are worried that they are about to add yet another layer of complexity onto frontline leaders who are already stretched. And they question whether their teams have the skills and the abilities to succeed with AI instead of being totally overwhelmed by it. At the frontline leader level, the fear is more personal. They worry AI will judge their decisions without context and replace their experience and eventually take their jobs. So the critical thing is really this. Unguided AI amplifies leadership inconsistency. Training plus AI is not a strategy. If AI is not embedded inside leadership workflows and calibrated to the company culture, it actually accelerates drift and creates more chaos instead of improving performance. You're muted, Laura.
Okay, let's kick this off. Ajay, if you look across the organizations you work with, how would you describe the state of AI in contact centers in 2026? Are we still experimenting, or are we in a scale and standardization phase? And specifically, where are you seeing real measurable value versus just pilots and demos?
Okay. In my view, and based on different customers that I have worked with, I think we've distinctly moved, from pilots to, deployment, not at scale, but definitely, slowly moving towards that, right? I've seen a lot of customers, get a lot of value whenever their solution is grounded, in data. It's defined by clear vision and policies, right? And it's and there are four areas, in which I've seen, implementations being very successful: post-call summarization, self-serve bots, agent assist solutions, and QA automation. Now, some of the leaders are now beginning to move, using insights into role redesign, as well as, improving business outcomes. So that is, the pivot that I have seen, which is happening in 2026.
And can you share one concrete example where human and AI changed a key metric like AHT, FCR, or NPS without hurting the customer experience?
Let me talk about this. I think all of the metrics are being changed. So the biggest change which is happening is as insights become, more and more, predictable, we are moving from a de facto report to more predictive metrics. Right? Now I can look at all the interactions and AI can give me a predictive count on what's the FCR, what's the NPS. Right? Now, how do I use it? Now, we have used this, with some of our customers to say which of the customers will call back me. And we have made that actionable by saying, is it due to policies and procedures? Is it due to something that the agent could have done? Or is it due to system limitations? So AI is now allowing us to improve all business metrics by making them more predictive rather than post facto.
So Ajay, you've painted a picture of where AI is delivering value. A big enabler for that is how well we manage and use knowledge. Martin, you work deeply in knowledge management and intelligent content. Historically, poor knowledge has meant long handle times, inconsistent answers, and frustrated agents. With AI in 2026, what does a modern knowledge layer look like in a human and AI contact center? And what separates organizations that get this right from the ones that struggle?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the most visible AI implementation when it comes to knowledge management is, the chatbot, right? As the previous presenter was talking about, the knowledge on Rails was the old experience, and that's gotten better with LLMs. But that's primarily something that's used by customers, and you're seeing a little bit of, transition into using the same technology for agent assist, where an AI agent is monitoring the conversation between the support agents and the customers and then recommending answers. And that's very powerful and can really reduce those handle times. But I think it's just the tip of the iceberg. When you can embed AI assistance into the knowledge creation and curation workflow, that's where, teams I'm working with are making it faster and easier for agents to share the knowledge that they're creating through the normal interactions with customers and updating knowledge where they're finding errors, right? And capturing that team lore that a lot of times gets lost and locked into silos. So those tools are really powerful for that knowledge creation and knowledge sharing, but also the curation, right? Making updates, knowledge articles, creating new knowledge articles, or retiring knowledge articles. AI can help with all of those tasks, and do it in a way that it doesn't put a lot of extra work onto the agents or require really a very a management heavy knowledge management structure in place to manage that knowledge. Nope, you're on mute.
Can you give an example of where improving the knowledge layer directly improved both agent experience and customer experience?
Sure. There are a number of really great knowledge management systems that in the last year or so have implemented some really stellar features. One of them is a system that provides AI help for creating and carrying content. Specifically, it's a feature that allows a subject matter expert to record their screen and record a voiceover while they complete a task in, say, an ERP system. And then the AI tool is then able to take that recording and create a step-by-step process document that is optimized for quick comprehension, both by humans and by AI agents. And so this makes it almost trivial to document processes and provide that really super hyper accurate knowledge both to agents and to customers. So you're improving the agent experience by making it, easier to create and share this knowledge, but you're also providing a better experience to customers because they're able to get really easy step-by-step processes that are simple to follow, and it doesn't take hours and hours and weeks to create that knowledge asset.
Okay, we've talked about technology and knowledge, but none of this works if leaders and agents don't adapt. Jim, from your vantage point coaching leaders, how are frontline agents and supervisors feeling about AI in 2026? There's excitement, but also fear about replacement. What are you hearing on the ground? And what are the best leaders doing to keep people engaged, supported, and future ready?
Well, what I hear on the ground is a mix of both relief and anxiety. Agents feel relief because AI can remove some of that cognitive load and reduce that searching and shortens, recovering or after call work time. Jason covered this on his session previously very effectively, did a good job on that. But supervisors feel anxiety because AI exposes inconsistency. So when guidance is visible, differences in decision quality and follow through, they're no longer hidden. So if we think about the best leaders, and they're really doing three things. First, they are reframing AI as execution support, not evaluation. And I think we have to be really careful when we start getting into the whole concepts of quality monitoring and calibration and all of that. It's really important that we focus on execution support, not evaluation. They are explicit that AI is there to reduce guesswork, not to micromanage. And second, they are standardizing leadership behaviors before scaling their AI. They are clear on what good looks like, so AI reinforces alignment instead of opinion or tribal knowledge. Third, they're investing in support and guidance, not more training. Most supervisors, they don't need more tools and content. They need guidance and reinforcement that helps them align with their peers and the company expectations in the real flow of work. So future-ready teams aren't the ones with the most AI features. They're the ones where AI stabilizes execution instead of exposing gaps.
Great, thank you. And if I'm a contact center leader listening today, what is one concrete behavior I should start doing this month to help my team navigate the human and AI shift?
For me, I think it's really important to understand what we call the phone factors. And they exist in every single person on this planet. And I'll explain those in a second. So going back to when I had mentioned something about, well, senior level leaders have things that's on their mind, mid-level and as well as frontline, is the phone factors are fear. We all have fear. And they're through our lens and through our perspective. We are all dealing with overconfidence, right? When we hear certain pieces of information, we think we know all of that. I call it the Holiday Inn Express syndrome. Yeah, I stayed there last night. I could do that brain surgery. The next thing is negative impressions. I don't want anybody to think that I'm incompetent or don't know what I'm talking about or that I don't know how to do my job. And the other thing is execution blindness, is that, well, I really, especially in remote environments, I really don't know what my peers are doing, my fellow leaders, and I can't really see if I'm actually meeting or aligning with the company expectations and goals. So those things, we have to know that they exist everywhere. So when we approach our conversations, when we talk about AI, when we talk about transformation, when we talk about culture, those things are real human behaviors and they reside in all of us.
So we've grounded ourselves in where we are: AI value, knowledge as a foundation, and the human experience on the front line. Let's move into how human and AI actually worked together in the flow of work. Ajay, when you redesign a contact center for 2026, how do you decide who does what? What tasks should be 100% AI? What stays 100% human? And where do they truly collaborate? How do you map that out?
So, the answer is very subjective. It totally depends upon what is the objective with which you are implementing AI, in your contact center. The broad principle remains the same. It's automate, augment, and evolve. But how does that apply? So I'm going to answer that in two layers. One at an interaction layer, one at a business process layer. So when you implement AI at an interaction layer, so when I'm saying all the reasons that the customers are contacting us, right? Then here's the way you use AI. You typically use AI to eliminate what I call information and transaction based, calls or chats, or messaging. And you augment what you call problem resolution or advisory. So you provide support to the agent, right? So that's at an interaction layer, right? But that if you're only implementing AI, at that layer, you're just skimming the surface, right? The true value of AI comes when you begin to apply it, at the business process layer. And let me use coaching as an example, right? Now, when you look at coaching as an end-to-end process, so what you automate using AI, is the call scoring, the insights, the dashboard, the reporting, right? So all of that is automated, right? What you augment for a supervisor, from a coaching process, is things like coaching preparation, things like root cause analysis, right? And then what the supervisor does on his own, is the actual delivery, holding accountability, creating action plans, right? So that's the way, the human and AI come together, right? So what AI does, it doesn't eliminate the role, it elevates the role. So for example, in this case, the role of the supervisors, elevates from a call enforcer, to somebody who now accelerates performance. The agent, move, from script followers, to what I will call, providing decision support, to the customer, or problem solvers, for the customers. The managers and leaders, their role evolves based on the insight that AI generates them, from being reactive, to drafting policy, improving workflows, right? So that's the way I think, AI really, works in conjunction with the humans and allows us to elevate all roles.
And Jim, what's a task you refuse to automate today, even if the tech can do it?
I refuse to automate human judgment at moments that define trust. Escalation decisions, exception handling, and human accountability should never be fully automated. AI can narrow options, surface patterns, and actually remove noise, but humans must own the final call when the outcomes affect fairness, safety, and dignity. So the mistake organizations make is thinking automation equals efficiency. In reality, poorly governed automation shifts risk downstream. The goal is not fewer humans involved. If it is, you're going to be on a fast path downward. The goal needs to be fewer unguided decisions. High-performing environments use AI to constrain choices and reinforce standards, not to outsource responsibility. Automation should reduce variance, not remove ownership.
And Martin, once you know who should do what, the next question is, can AI and humans actually access the right information at the right time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's not just, having it there, but, making sure that the information is accurate that underlies it, right? So, it doesn't matter if it's, you've got a high speed to answer with an AI system. It's if, um, you have the right information backing that answer up.
And Martin, we're seeing a big rise in AI copilots for agents, real-time suggestion engines, and smart knowledge surfacing. In a human and AI setup, what does great real-time agent assistance look like in 2026? And where do you see teams going wrong with these tools?
Yeah. You know, AI powered natural language search is a big improvement over kind of older keyword search tools. And that's table stakes for many of the modern KM systems that are out there. Agent Assist, we've talked about that a couple of times already, where you have the AI agent monitoring the call or chat and suggesting answers in real time. It's very powerful. And I think that you'll see more companies really, exploring that and deploying that in the contact center in 2026. Where companies go wrong with all of this, though, is not having a solid knowledge management framework in place that provides the right structure and that makes sure that the knowledge that you're feeding the AI system and your agents is accurate, relevant, and unique, right? The framework should not only include, governance over the knowledge content, but it also needs to provide guidance about how you evaluate your AI answers and how do you correct those errors?
Hey, Ajay, where do AI copilots go wrong most often? Wrong answers, too many prompts, outdated knowledge, or lack of context?
I would say all of that. But let me, get a little bit more specific, right? AI, the agent assist solution struggle, whenever the policies are not very clear, right? So in the face of ambiguity, right, you can't use AI to repair a broken process, right? So your policies have to be very clear. And then your AI agents have to be grounded in clarity and context, right? The way a certain bank takes a fee waiver call could be totally different, from the way the other bank takes the fee waiver call, right? So are you taking time when you are building your agent assist solutions to ground your intent-based guidance, right, on context? That's very important. The other is the ability of the AI to understand the correct intent, and provide required support. And it is an iterative exercise. So the more time you spend in designing a solution, the less problems you will have, once you implement it.
Thank you. And Jim, when AI starts giving agents guidance in real time, the job of the leader changes quite a bit. So in an AI assisted environment where agents get prompts, summaries, and post-call insights, how does coaching change? Do supervisors coach the agents, the AI configuration, or both? What does high impact coaching look like in 2026?
Well, coaching shifts from interpretation to calibration. Supervisors are no longer guessing what happened or why. AI actually provides the signal, and coaching then focuses on alignment and removing obstacles. So high impact coaching in 2026 is actually doing three things. First, supervisors coach the execution, not the person. And that's an important distinction. The conversation is about whether behaviors and actions align to standards. Second, they tune the system. If AI guidance is consistently ignored or overridden, leaders don't blame the agent. They examine whether the guidance fits the workflow and the culture. And then third, coaching becomes continuous and lighter and fewer postmortems, more in the moment reinforcement. The biggest shift is this: supervisors are no longer the memory of the system. They are the stewards of the execution integrity.
And Martin, in 20 seconds, how do you design performance metrics so you don't punish agents for not following AI when it's wrong?
Yeah, I think there's three things you can do. You can pivot to outcome over adherence. So stop measuring, did the human agent, adhere to the script? Did they say what the AI told them? Start measuring resolution accuracy. You can implement an AI disagreement flag. So, give agents a one-click button to say, hey, this AI gave me the wrong answer, right? And turn that into a reward as data training. So, is the agent helping to train the AI bot? And then always have a human in the loop QA. So you never want to let an AI auto grader have the final word on a low score. If that AI QA flags something as a low score, a human needs to take a look at that and understand the context around it. It could be that the agent provided, you know, the right answer even though they didn't follow the script, right? And you don't want to penalize an agent for that.
We're touching some big risks and responsibilities already. So let's talk explicitly about the guardrails side of human and AI. Ajay, when AI is embedded into routing, responses, and workflows, the risk surface changes. What are the most serious operational risks you see in AI-enabled contact centers today? Things like hallucinations, wrong answers at scale, or brittle automations, and how are leading organizations mitigating them?
So, as you said, so the most common risk, in implementing AI solutions, especially if it's at an interaction layer, are, closed loop interactions, where the AI is not able to answer and doesn't pass it to the agent, doesn't know that it does not know the right answer, right? Incorrect responses, could be another risk. The third could be, out of context answers, which AI was never supposed to give. Like, how was US foreign policy? And AI was never supposed to answer that question, for example. But to me, the fix here, is not the AI or the model issue, right? It's the design, implementation, and testing issue, right? Now, if you design your solution correctly, right, based on performance intelligence layer, understanding why customers are calling, be very clear about what intent you can automate, what intent you want to move to the agent. You can go ahead and mitigate that risk. So good organizations today are investing upfront, taking time to design the system, update their knowledge management, policies and processes so that AI is not working off, a broken process, or a not updated knowledge banks, and putting proper guardrails to mitigate that risk.
Hey, and Jim, if you had to mandate 2 guardrails every AI-enabled contact center needs this year, what are they?
Well, first, I would say, AJ, it could be that U.S. foreign policy is being run by AI hallucinations. We don't quite know that yet. Okay, so 2 guardrails. First guardrail is AI must operate inside defined leadership workflows. If AI sits outside how decisions are actually made, it'll be ignored or misused. So guidance has to show up where execution actually happens. And the second guardrail is culture must be encoded, not assumed. And this is critical. AI should reinforce company standards, language, and priorities, not generic best practices. If culture lives only in training, AI will fracture it at a faster rate than you've ever experienced in your life. If you do not govern AI, AI will govern you. These guardrails are not about control. They're about protecting consistency and growing a culture at scale.
A lot of those risks come down to data and knowledge quality. Martin, human and AI works only as well as the data and knowledge behind it. How are mature organizations in 2026 handling data quality, access control, and governance so that AI-driven knowledge remains accurate, secure, and explainable to agents, customers, and auditors?
So the clients and the companies I'm working with are doing this successfully They start with a solid knowledge management strategy that covers governance, technology, and culture/people, right? All three are critical requirements. You can't ignore any of those three legs or the whole system is just going to collapse over time. When it comes to governance, having a solid knowledge management framework in place is super important. There are a number of them out there, right? ISO 30401 has been around for a while. Knowledge-centered service is another one that's been around for years. Other companies have built their own frameworks by borrowing bits and pieces from existing published frameworks, right? So you can build something from scratch, or you can use something that's already out there. But the commonality between all these frameworks is that it ensures that the knowledge remains accurate and secure and explainable to everyone, from customers to agents to auditors to even AI agents, right?
And do you see any non-negotiable practices around versioning, approvals, or human review before knowledge is used by AI at scale?
Yeah, non-negotiable. Human review is the non-negotiable when it comes to AI and knowledge management. If you've got a vendor out there claiming that they can provide a knowledge management system that uses AI exclusively from content creation to content curation, that's just going to be a road to disaster.
And trust isn't just technical, it's deeply human. Jim, you can have the best AI stack in the world, but if people don't trust it or they feel threatened by it, you won't get adoption. What are some practical ways leaders can build trust in AI among agents and supervisors while being honest about role changes and new skill expectations?
Yeah, they've done a lot of studies on this, and trust actually comes from predictability. Leaders build trust by being explicit about what AI will and will not do. AI must support execution, and it does not replace judgment. It does not make HR decisions. It does not evaluate motivation and engagement. Second, leaders involve supervisors early in shaping the guidance. When people recognize their reality reflected in AI workflows, the trust increases quickly. And there's been a lot of research when you start talking about managing change, managing transformation. If you're not familiar with the acronym called VUCA, VUCA, you need to learn about that. Third, leaders tell the truth about role evolution. Some tasks will disappear. Expectations will rise. The trade-off is clarity and growth. When AI reduces ambiguity, people can focus on impact instead of survival. The fastest way to destroy trust is to pretend nothing is changing or everything is changing. The fastest way to build it is to govern change openly and consistently.
And for all of you, is there a specific change management move that you think is underrated but extremely powerful in this human and AI transition?
John, I can. So based on the solutions that I have implemented, one of the biggest change management suggestions that I would make is keep it an iterative process, right? Don't be set on, because your limits will change, your objectives will change, so it has to be an iterative process. Implementing through an AI solution, at least in my experience, I've learned so much that the solutions and evolved, and they have changed, right? And my number two change management would be, as you implement AI solutions, right, the biggest change management in reskilling and redefining roles, and you need to spend a lot of time ensuring that you're doing that. So that would be my two suggestions.
I would follow it up by saying that, when you're planning your AI implementation, and even in the implementation itself, as much as possible, involve the the people are going to be using these systems in that design and that implementation, right? You don't want it to be some mysterious thing that's they see as being, foisted upon them and that they have to use, right? You need to involve them and remove the mystery because, there's a lot of fear and a lot of concern around AI. And, customers and employees are really concerned about, is this going to, replace somebody's job? And so when you can involve those folks in that design and give them a really good understanding of what it's going to do to help them, you're going to have a lot more success, I think.
So AJ and Martin hit on some really important things, and I would say there's a book that you want to purchase if it's not already on your bookshelf, and it is called Change the Way You Change. The author is Kendall Lyman, Lyman, and he hits on this by studying all these different change initiatives and how organizations have found success through transformation. And again, you need to learn VUCA, is that it requires bottom up, probably even more so than top down. However, human behavior is we're going to force this change because we have to make it happen. And that just it never works. But that's our human reaction. It's command and control. We're going to do this. We're going to get it done. Push it down. And then you get something to come right back up. And it's typically called vomit.
Well, we've talked about today's realities and risks. Let's close where this is all going over the next few years and what our audience should actually do on Monday morning. So I'd love to do a rapid forward-looking round. Imagine you're advising a head of CX or contact center leader who wants to be future ready by 2028. Ajay, by 2028, what will good look like for a human and AI contact center operating model? And if you had to pick one technology bet leaders should make now, what would it be?
What would look good? I would say that they would have moved to driving business outcomes, in place of just driving efficiencies, right? What would look very good is all the roles in the companies, would have evolved, as the AI solution, are implemented. For example, Jim talked about the role of a supervisor, how the coaching would evolve. So all the, roles would evolve, right? Now, if you were to talk about one technology bet, I would say that you need to start with investing in a performance intelligence layer because that will give you insights into what you can automate, what is that your people need support. So that would be one solution, that I would strongly recommend, that the leaders on this call, look to implement within their contact centers because it can become their starting point, for implementing all the AI solutions. I believe by 28, all information transaction-based transactions, would be handled by AI, and the agents would have excellent support, for any problem resolution or advisory. And we can look at automating some of that by becoming predictive as well through advanced auto notifications, anticipating problems, like change in temperatures, systems breaking down. So that's the way I visualize the contact center in 2028.
And Martin, in 2028, how do you envision knowledge and AI intelligence working together? What should leaders start building today so they're not playing catch up in 3 years?
Yeah, I think there's three things to really focus on. First is shifting to a zero trust data governance model. So, start tagging and verifying the knowledge that you have today. If you can't prove that a piece of knowledge was verified by a human or some sort of trusted source, your future AI will, hallucinate its own synthetic kind of garbage, right? The next thing to do is standardize your ontology. What does that mean? AI can't reason across silos if customer means one thing in sales and another in finance. So you want to build a shared business language. That's your taxonomy, right? This is the dictionary that you're going to use to talk to each other, whether it's the AI agents or the human agents. And you want to transition from prompting to system design. So, in 2024, the talk was, how do you build a good prompt? How's this a skill that you can improve and write a great prompt? I think in 2027, it's going to be more workflow architecture, right? So you want to stop training, or stop your team from thinking about tasks and start thinking about processes, right? So the collection of those tasks. And leaders really need to be mapping out how human and specialized AI and general AI all work together in a relay race to make all this happen. And bonus, that human in the loop, right? That's your your hallucination insurance. Sorry, stumbled there. You want to build internal protocols where AI generated insights are peer reviewed by experts before being fed back into that gold standard knowledge base. And that keeps your enterprise brain from decaying.
And Jim, by 2028, what will differentiate high-performing leaders and teams in AI-enabled contact centers? What is one skill every leader should actively develop starting this year?
I think by 2028, high-performing teams are not going to be defined by AI adoption. They'll actually be defined by that execution stability that all of us really have kind of talked about. The winners will be teams where decisions, behavior, standards, and culture hold steady over time, even as the tools evolve. So one skill every leader must develop now is execution stewardship. And that's the ability to design, govern, and reinforce how work gets done, not just what should be done. Leaders who understand that AI amplifies whatever system it touches will invest in execution systems first. And Martin hit on some of those key elements real quick in regards to that whole, ontology, the knowledge, the native knowledge, capturing that from the people who may be exiting soon. You also need to learn about semantics. So if I'm covering certain parts of the geographic region and somebody says, you betcha, what does that mean? When they say cat got your tongue, what does that mean? So that human in the loop, crucial. So leaders who understand all of these things and understand what execution first means are going to be the ones who are really going to have the greatest level of success in this. So everyone everyone else will keep wondering why performance varies despite this fantastic technology.
Okay, thank you, Ajay, Martin, and Jim, for such a rich and practical conversation. If we zoom out, a few themes stand out. AI is powerful, but it only works when you get process, knowledge, and people right. Human and AI is not about replacement. It's about redesigning work so humans focus on judgment, empathy, and complex problem solving, while AI handles the heavy lifting of information and routine tasks. And the leaders who will win are those who invest simultaneously in technology, governance, and human capability. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope you're leaving with concrete ideas you can take back to your own contact centers. Now we'll open the floor for live Q&A. If you've already posted a question in the chat Q&A, we'll start there. And we have one for Martin. You mentioned KCS. I think create, reuse, improve should not go away, but should shift. So from a knowledge management standpoint, how should teams rethink the create, reuse, improve cycle so knowledge stays trustworthy at scale?
Yeah, I don't think they need to rethink that cycle so much as, rethink a little bit about how they're doing it. And AI offers a whole wealth of different tools to help improve that cycle, right? Help with the creation, right? So, with KCS, we spent a lot of effort on, having KCS coaches to help KCS contributors to be able to create content. And there's a content standard that they have to adhere to. With AI tools, it makes it a lot easier for those contributors to get that contribution adhering to the standard right the first time. So it speeds up that process. And then I've got a number of tools that can help with, understanding what's being reused, what is missing, and what needs to be created. And so I think that AI really can amplify teams that have those KCS programs already in place or are thinking about implementing it.
Thank you, Martin. And one last question. In 5 years, what will be the single biggest differentiator between AI-driven contact centers that thrive and those that fail?
If you
Who's
want,
that question?
I can, attempt. Meaning, in my view, you need to spend enough time in having a very clear vision of what do you want AI to achieve in your contact center. How are you designing the process? Then is your process iterative? Are you questioning AI? Meaning in terms of there needs to be a regular calibration and judgment, of, have we done this right? What is it that we need to change? So that operational discipline, is required, right? I believe the ones who successfully implement, would be the ones who follow all those rules. And then obviously the role redesign. Are you as AI changes roles and processes, right? Are you reskilling those people? Are you investing time with your people to elevate their roles and reskill them for those roles? That I believe would be critical as
well. Okay, thank you.
So I think from my perspective, and you see that you see and hear this a lot, is that the ones who are really going to be the exceptional ones that we highlight are the ones that oftentimes we highlight now in regards to customer experience. And so we have to think about this. If we look at company profits and company profitability, the M's, the B's, and the T's require the P's. So whether it's millions, billions, or trillions, it all relies on the people. And as we get rid of all of the things that are not complex and only have remaining the things that are complex, our knowledge has to be greater, our leadership has to be stronger, and if when those things are going to be improved, the organizations that do that are going to be the ones that are most exceptional. We're always going to have these mega organizations that have 1,200 plus agents that are only concerned with, the age old, as we refer to as butts in seat. Those days are over.
Yeah, I think Jim and AJ covered it well. I think the folks that are going to have the most success are the ones that are going to be, are taking a really thoughtful approach to what they're doing with AI and understanding why they're doing it and what they want to achieve with those outcomes, right? And by really focusing on the people and the knowledge that those people have, those companies are really be able to turn these projects into the successes that they want them to be.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our session. Thank you, all three of you, for some really great insights today. And we will move into, the next session. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Our next session is Contact Center AI Security and Privacy, Safeguarding Trust in the Age of Intelligent CX. In 2026, trust is no longer a brand value sitting in a slide deck. It's an operating requirement. Contact centers are rapidly becoming AI-powered ecosystems across voice, chat, and digital assistants, and they're processing more data than ever. Personal identifiers, payment-adjacent details, behavioral signals, and sometimes even highly sensitive context shared in moments of stress. AI can absolutely improve speed, consistency, and personalization, but it also changes the risk profile. It introduces new failure modes, unintended disclosure, model or prompt exploitation, insecure integrations, overcollection, and decisions that can't be explained when customers demand answers. Today, we'll focus on what leaders actually need to do to deliver next-gen CX without compromising privacy, security, and accountability, and how to build trust into AI systems from the ground up. But before we dive in, a quick note, please drop your questions in the Q&A chat as we go, and we'll reserve time at the end for a live audience Q&A. And today I'm joined by two leaders with very complementary perspectives. Louis Carrillo is a CX executive who has led customer operations at brands like Ipsy and Rise Superfoods, with deep experience scaling AI-enabled contact center teams in regulated and high-growth environments. His work focuses on turning AI strategy into day-to-day operational behaviors that improve speed and consistency while protecting trust, privacy, and human judgment. And Jason Scott Livingston, Chief Customer Officer and co-founder at Start With Care Consulting, bringing the customer trust and experience lens, how organizations communicate AI use, design for transparency, and protect relationships when things go wrong. Thank you both for being here, and let's get started. We've seen AI adoption accelerate fast. Predictive routing, agent assist, auto summaries, conversational bots, even early autonomous resolution. But as soon as AI touches customer conversations, it's not just IT risk anymore. It becomes a trust and brand risk.
Mhm.
Where do you see the biggest security and privacy vulnerabilities emerging as AI becomes more embedded in CX operations?
I can go first, Jason, if you want. So when I look at where things break, it's usually not the model itself, it's what happens around it, right? For me, AI moves fast and contact centers are messy by nature. You got agents under pressure, you have edge cases, emotional customers, and now a tool that feels authoritative. That combination is what risk shows up, in my opinion. The biggest vulnerabilities I see comes from how people use AI day to day, copying and pasting sensitive info in places that doesn't belong, over trusting suggestions because they sound confident, not accurate, and not knowing when to do or what to do when AI hits something it wasn't designed to handle.
Very good. Yeah. I shared an article with the creators of Techsommet that I wrote recently talking about the human component in basically all contact center privacy and risk failures. And we're actually the problem 99% of the time. Bad code is written by humans. Social engineering came about because of us. But this is really more focused, I think, on AI in this conversation. And so, yeah, as we introduce AI into the contact center, and the last group, I think, just nailed this. Really, we're looking at three key components to making sure that your vulnerabilities are addressed, which is getting your data right. If you start with bad data, you're going to get it's bad data in, bad data out, right? Your integrations have to be solid. Your model behavior has to be clean. You have to have clear processes that your operations can adapt. So, Luis just hit on this too. You know, if you don't have, if your current agent group can't do it right because the process isn't clearly defined, there's no way an AI solution is going to be able to do it. So you got to start with that. Get your data, processes, and everything right.
Great, and well said. So the vulnerabilities aren't theoretical. Let's talk about the biggest accelerator of both value and risk, generative AI. Luis, when if a team only has time and budget, sorry, this is for all of you actually.
Okay.
If a team only has time and budget for generative AI introduces new risks, data leakage, hallucinations, unattended exposure through summaries, co-pilots, and bots. So if a team only has time and budget for a minimum baseline this quarter, what's non-negotiable? Redaction, policy enforcement, model isolation, logging, or something else?
So I touched on this in the presentation I did earlier today, but there's going to be a fundamental shift. Whereas, currently quality is analyzed right now in most contact center environments on a sample basis, meaning that I'm not going to be able to listen to every single customer interaction, but AI is going to change that. You literally are and can parse every single conversation that takes place, and so you can much more well, way easier to access. I can't talk. It gets way easier to access data related to quality failures. And what I'm trying to get at here is, so as you move forward with that, like I saw this firsthand at Adventify. So, for example, they had a very clear prompt as they were taking and scheduling. It was a cleaning service. I won't name the franchise, but very popular one that everybody knows. And somebody's chatting with their AI agent, "Hey, I need to schedule a house cleaning." And one of the customers decided to ask about whether or not that particular house cleaner could do it with no clothing. And which is always a terrible question to get asked. Now, an agent would know what to do with that, but an AI agent didn't necessarily know how to handle that. Fortunately, it didn't hallucinate. It didn't go off track. It basically tried to re-steer things back and just said that's not in our process. But we were able to very quickly recraft the prompt so that if anybody ever asks a question like that, it's basically just going to disconnect. It's going to say, "Hey, look, that's offline. That's not appropriate. We're closing this chat." And so that's, I think, the key that I'm trying to get at here is you have to make sure that you got a process in place where you're reviewing that quality interaction, that you're looking at the calls that are happening and chats that are taking place and being able to implement better prompting. And if you don't have that built into your process, you're going to fail.
Thank you. And Luis, any additional thoughts from you on that?
I think Jason, nailed it. I think, having better guardrails to your processes, making sure that you analyze all of the escalations, and build the right knowledge around it, because garbage in, garbage out, it's pivotal for that.
Absolutely. Controls only matter if they survive real operations, messy conversations, edge cases, and exceptions. So, Luis, when AI is deployed into the daily workflow, into agent assist, auto wrap, and suggested responses, what are the most common ops leaks that you see? So, for example, agents copying and pasting sensitive content, over trusting suggestions, inconsistent escalation, weak handling of exceptions.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I've seen it all, but I think the most common issue that I see is overtrust. I think when something lightning is new, is in front of us, we tend to overtrust it too much. And agents assume if the tool kind of says it, it must be right. Especially when they're moving fast. Especially we need to come down from being able to move away from just the quantity of it and to the quality of it. Another big consistency, another one for me is inconsistency. Two agents get the same suggestions and handle it completely differently. AI, in my opinion, doesn't fix that. It actually exposes it. And there are obviously exceptions, right? AI is great on the happy path, the transactional items, but real customers really stay there. They want more than just the transactional aspect, right? When something weird kind of shows up, that's when when things leak, in my opinion.
And what training or QA changes have the biggest impact without slowing the floor down?
Yeah, I think in what I've experienced the most is scenario based coaches or long decks. I think that everybody learns differently, but when you make it policy related or too long, people get the the aspect wrong. Um, QA also has to evolve, in my opinion. You're not just checking the outcome anymore. You're checking how AI was used. For example, was it challenged? Was it validated? Was it escalated when it should have been escalated? I always tell teams to ask one simple question: would you be comfortable explaining this interaction to a customer late or regulator? That tends to sharpen judgment without kind of slowing anyone down.
And Jason, when these
Yeah.
issues happen, customers don't care whether it was a model, glitch or a process gap. They care that trust was broken. So from the customer and brand perspective, what are the highest risk moments for trust in AI-driven CX? And what are the best companies doing to reduce reputational damage before something goes wrong?
That is a great question. The highest risk moments, I think, aren't when AI makes a small mistake. It's really when AI makes a mistake that feels personal to the customer, irreversible, or unaccountable. These type of mistakes cause reputational risk. Here's a few examples. So, sensitive content, for example, hardship, fraud, billing disputes, cancellation, anything involving vulnerability or finances. I mean, that's going to immediately kill it. Authority moments where AI decides or appears to make a decision, like denying a refund, setting policies, or implying a final answer that's incorrect. That's not per your company policy, or maybe conflicts, as Luis just mentioned. And then disclosure moments when a summary transcript or agent assist leaks repeat sensitive details. Yeah, I mentioned this in that article too. I worked at AOL when that famous case took place where people were able to basically social engineer access into an AOL member's account and determine that he was his sexuality, which resulted in the, don't ask, don't tell process of having him expelled from his service. And, that was a huge lawsuit that took place and caused waves across the space. When you mess with people's personal information, it gets bad. It gets bad fast. And in my earlier conversation, that 80-20 thing, that's the thing. Like the 80% is usually so systematic that anybody can do it. It's that 20% where things can really go wrong. But the best companies, what they do before something goes wrong is to treat trust like an operating requirement. So they implement, auditability, as I mentioned earlier, making sure that there's a very clear QA process, logs that show who and what happened, when and where and why and how, and that they implement those guardrails, as Luis mentioned, policy enforcement redaction, safe human escape hatches, and then they operationalize continuous evaluation using frameworks like govern, map, measure, manage. So trust isn't just a slide, but it's a life cycle discipline. I can recommend a great book called Farsighted by Stephen Johnson, and it highlights the whole process for getting bin Laden, and talks about red teams and all these different processes that you can use to make better decisions. And as you scope and scale your AI solutions, you need to have that approach. Yeah.
Great. And Luis, any additional thoughts you'd like to add on that as well?
It's really hard to follow what Jason said, but because he pretty much nailed it. I think having that the guardrails again. I come back to the guardrails and the process improvement is everything when you're establishing AI governance.
Right. And Jason, how do you communicate, AI use to customers in a way that is clear and confidence building, and not scary or vague? Where's the line between transparency and overwhelming people?
That is a great question. So, as I mentioned earlier, in a previous conversation, so I worked firsthand with an AI solution company at the beginning of last year, and their AI agents were so good that customers would chat with them and then not realize that they weren't actually human beings, and they would then try to call in and speak to those agents that they had been chatting with. And, that's the ideal. You want to get to that level of trust where customers feel like it's seamless. Building in escape hatches where the AI gets stuck so that it can pass to an agent is super easy to do in a chat environment because it can pass to a live human and nobody knows. Phone is going to be way more complicated, so you have to make sure that everything is super, super clear. But um, the thing that I struggled with personally when I was working on this is, well, do we let people know? If they straight up ask, "Hey, are you an AI agent?" Do we tell them? And of course, our policy was yes. So I think that's fundamental. You cannot deny or decline to tell the truth. You should always be forthcoming to your customer when it comes to your use of AI. So if they straight up ask, be honest, yes, I'm an AI agent, and expose the truth, it shows the trust. And then if they want, say, you can add, and I think this is critical, you need to have the capability to say, if you'd like to speak to a real human, I'm more than happy to pass you off to one of my counterparts. Um, Giving that escape hatch to them helps to cement and build that trust. People are going to get used to this process, and they're actually going to prefer it because they get clear, quicker and faster answers as your security and systems increase. And so you should move in that direction, but you always have to build that off ramp, at least in the early stages.
And have you seen examples where being open about it, AI actually improved trust?
I mean, yeah, I mean, in some of those examples I just gave you. So we had customers that would straight up ask, "Hey, are you real? Are you an actual person?" And say, "No, I'm actually an AI agent. I'm really happy to help you though, and we've got your appointment set." Um, and it was like, "Oh, well, you're a very good AI agent. That's awesome." And then they would move on. Like they didn't cancel their appointments. It cemented the reality of the situation, and then it allowed them to gain some new respect and trust for that provider. Like, hey, I got what I needed fast, and it worked, and it's great, and they're going to show up, and I'm going to deal with the live human when the job's done, so it's okay. But we saw that continually. Like we actually got very positive feedback and reviews through that process. So yeah, it's all in the approach, and everybody in CX knows that, right? It's all in the approach, and getting support to make sure that that approach works right from your leadership is critical.
And thank you. Luis, inside the contact center, the same transparency question applies to agents too. How do you build agent trust and correct usage of AI so they don't blindly follow it, but they also don't ignore it? What operational habits or coaching methods work best?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Before I actually go to that, I want to pivot to what Jason said. I mean, trusting, the transparency in your process is key. I actually appreciate when I go through any AI bot and they actually tell me that ahead, and I will try it as much as I can because I'm really open. But I've talked to other people that are not in the CX side of it, and they actually appreciate the proactiveness more. But to the question is, agents don't automatically trust AI. They test it. Sometimes they over trust it. In my opinion, once they get comfortable, but they don't automatically trust it. Um, if it helps them early, they kind of lean in. If it burns them one or twice, they tend to ignore it or kind of work around it, right? Going back to the old habits. So the way that you introduce AI really matters more than forcing anybody to use it.
Mhm.
In my opinion, the framing that works well is treating AI like a second set of eyes, not a decision maker per se, at least on the non transactional cases, right? We should coach agents to challenge it the same way that they challenge a new teammate, right? You don't trust anybody that just join in until you start working with them, start kind of establishing that rapport and that trust. In my opinion, you need to use the AI. I've always tell people use AI, my agents use AI, question it, and remember that accountability never moves off from the human, right? We cannot make the bot accountable for the things. We need to make, kind of shifting that to the human. So people are not gonna, blame the bot. They're gonna blame the company and the humans behind the bot. I also think, trust will be something that companies have to prove, not just kind of promise. Customers really expect clear accountability, fast correction when something goes wrong,
Mhm.
and to Jason's point, and this is key for me, an easy path to human when it really matters, right? Again, non-transactional, high empathy, cases, financial, cases where a lot of private information is going to be disclosed. You need to provide an easy path to humans. The companies that win will invest in my opinion, less flashy automation and more in governance, QA for the AI behavior, and strong incident report. The best AI CX will feel quiet when it works, and very human when it doesn't. So that's what I think it will do.
And thank you. Any additional thoughts from you on that, Jason, before we move on?
No, I thought Luis nailed that. That explanation was just spot on. So you probably saw me nodding. I have nothing to add. That was great.
Excellent. All right. Well, then, when these issues happen, Jason, customers don't care whether it was a model glitch or a process gap. They just care that the trust was broken. So
Yeah.
from the customer and brand perspective, what are the highest risk moments for trust in AI-driven CX? And what are the best companies doing to reduce reputational damage before something goes wrong?
So I think Luis kind of hit that. So, I worked for a company called BioWare, which is now owned by Electronic Arts. And we were producing a Star Wars video game. And when I joined, I hadn't worked in the gaming space prior to this. And intentionally, they went out of market because they realized they need to, implement some best practice into the space. No one in that particular genre had done a successful launch of those type of programs or that type of service, just because they were so destroyed. And some of you may have heard of World of Warcraft. Like if you submitted a ticket after a patch or after they launched and you had a super long wait up to 3 months to get a response just because they so understaffed or were overwhelmed. There was another platform that launched a game where the CRM was making so many calls to the Gave server, which is basically their product, that it crashed, and so they had to shut the CRM off. So, you don't have a very effective CX team if they have no CRM. So, um, coming on board and learning about the processes there to understand, how we could build a solution that was going to work. I quickly realized that, and they told me as I came on board that this is going to be a very different scenario for you, because in this particular environment, people are using their extra money and their free time to play this product. And so when you mess with that, the emotion level and the response level is equal to that. So it's not like I'm calling to get my bank balance. This is, you screwed with something that I just spent a lot of time and effort doing, and now it's messed up and I'm pissed. And so this is the key factor, and Luis just nailed it. That transactional volume that is simple and straightforward, that's where AI wins. Where it fails is when you get into that emotional interaction. And that's that 20%. That's the stuff that's super important. That's where you make or break a customer relationship, and you either extend CLV or you kill it. And so that's where the augmentation comes into play. All of us have been in environments where we've walked in and we've seen disruption, especially as organizations get larger. I came on board in one particular company where there were 3 directors of CX, each running a different contact center with no alignment. And you could literally get a different policy or procedure or answer as a customer or information depending upon which contact center you reached when you dialed in. So getting things aligned is critical. It really comes back to people, process, and tools. So if you can get the right people in the right seats, get those processes nailed down, documented, accurate, because again, if I don't put the right information into the AI prompts, I'm not going to get the right results back. And if I don't have that governance model in place that's watching it ongoing to make sure that things aren't getting missed or dropped, or it's misspeaking, or every time a bad experience happens, that should be an immediate trigger for us to make a decision. Is this a situation that needs to go to a live human? And here's the process and policy to handle that. So it's building that PMO, that project management office, that is going to constantly manage that flow. And that's really where things shift. We're going from being reactive to really more proactive as an organization, because we're going to be faster. We have to be faster. Sorry. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point, so I'm going to stop.
No, thank you. This is a great information. Thank you. And of course, vendor controls matter. if we, think about, the customer experience having a single accountable owner, when multiple vendors are involved, how do you create clear accountability so customers aren't bounced around and leaders can say, here's what happened, here's what we changed?
Mm-hmm. Like you said, customers don't experience vendors. They don't know what they are. They don't get it. So they experience the brand. So accountability has to be designed completely into the process all the way from the top down. The operating model I recommend has three components. So one, you have to have a single accountable owner for that customer impacting AI behavior. One leader who has the authority to halt, roll back, or change policy across the whole system, who builds automation into that process. For those of you familiar with TPS, we're talking about an and-on cord. You need the ability to pull the brake, right? When systems break, when processes are interrupted, and focus on continual improvement. The next is end-to-end observability, shared logging, and traceability across your entire CCAS, CAM, bot layer, model provider, and middleware. If you can't reconstruct the chain of actions that take place, you can't protect that trust. And then finally, number three, contractual clarity. Who owns what risk, whether it's data processing, retention, instant response, evaluation. You have to treat it like a security issue with defined roles, SLAs for response, and evidence-based reporting. This is where frameworks help. A lot of us are very familiar, depending upon the specific requirements of our industry, KYC. There's just so many. I worked in the medical space. You want to talk about insane compliance requirements, HIPAA, et cetera. So, getting ISO certified is awesome. There's a lot of systems out there that currently exist. Some of them have been mentioned on the previous podcast. It's useful because it forces organizational level AI management as a systems approach with governance, responsibility, continual improvement, as I mentioned, rather than just a patchwork of vendor promises. So the bottom line is this: if you want to say, here's what happened and here's what we changed, you have to have that governance, the logs, and the authority, not just a vendor stack.
Great, thank you. And Luis, operationally, accountability shows up in how you respond to incidents, not just how you prevent them. So do you think contact centers should have formal AI incident response processes, similar to cybersecurity incident responses, to handle hallucinations, harmful outputs, privacy mishandling, or policy violations? What does that look like on the floor?
100%. I do really think all contact centers need formal AI incident response. And I go a step further. I don't think it should be owned or live in IT only, right? Because in my opinion, hallucination policy violations or privacy issues are operational matter that really hurts the brand. And nobody knows the operations and your customers more than your contact center. They happen in real conversations with real customers, right? So the response has to work on the floor. In practice, in my opinion, that means you don't panic and shut everything down, right? You pause the feature, you capture what happened, and move fast to understand the impact. So to Jason's point, like we have to move fast, but you don't have to panic and shut everything just because something didn't work. You pause, you iterate, you learn, and then you create the incident report and make sure that that incident report goes back to your AI engine so that that doesn't happen again.
And what gets documented? Who gets alerted? What's the containment playbook?
Yeah, that's a really good follow-up question. So you're, you document the interaction, right? Like you as the agent, you as the manager that took the escalation or that saw that. The AI output, you document that, what the agent did and how the customer was affected or was impacted. And then you pass that on to ops, security, and product. All of those departments and informations need, they all need the same story. In my opinion, there should not be finger pointing whatsoever. The goal is containment first, and then learning second.
Very good.
Yes, thank you. And one last question for Jason. Governance isn't just internal, it has to show up as responsible behavior that customers can feel. So,
Yeah.
where should organizations draw the line between AI automation and human validation, especially for sensitive cases like billing disputes, fraud concerns, medical and financial hardship, cancellations, or complaints?
So my rule on this is pretty straightforward. Automate the repeatable, human validate the consequential. Oh, sorry. That is a thumbs up. If the outcome
Great
can
emphasis.
material if the outcome can materially impact somebody's finances, safety, access, or dignity, human oversight has to be involved, like has to be required. A practical line leader can implement false as a harm threshold test. Based on what Luis was just saying, look, if well, actually, I'll come back to that. If the interaction involves like finances, money, fraud, hardship, medical, finance, vulnerability, I've talked about a bunch of these just a few minutes ago. All those compliance requirements that our various industries face, that's where you got to make sure that it's either very, very specific process driven or you pass it to a human. And we're going to get better at this. AI is going to get smarter. So that line is going to get really fuzzy really fast. When it goes back to that transactional stuff, like I've seen AIs that are well trained speak to customers better than my agents can. And they can connect in a way that agents can't. Just because they're not getting tired, they're not having to do switching costs when they have to change tasks. There's the capability for them to get really focused. So that being said, and we've said this throughout this thing, have the human in the process when it comes to this kind of stuff, but be aware that that will adjust over time, and you're going to constantly have to move that yardstick. But anyway, I guess at the end of the day, if it is a low risk informational request and you've got solid process and knowledge, automation is fine, but with a clear escalation path. And I want to come back to what Luis was saying before, and that is that, I've worked in a lot of organizations where tech was completely separate from the CX team and the CX organization. When I needed, especially those tech first companies, you'll have this big giant tech group that's building the product or the service, the SaaS company that has this really robust solution. Um, and so, you may get allocated resources that you're using to produce fixes when new issues emerge. But if you don't own those, and that goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of this, there has to be that responsibility. And so if you're in CX right now and you don't own your tech resources, you need to start making your business case and going back to your C-suite to own those resources. And here's why. Because the minute something fails, what happens? Tech's going to run to fix it. And they're going to put all the best people on it and they're going to dedicate their resources. And those very people that you need to provide you with a workaround or a solution or an answer or a fix right now are going to be gone. And so if you don't own those people and have the ability to tell the tech teams, no, you can't take my developer, I need him right now, you're going to lose the ability to adjust. So, regarding governance and ownership, that AI can be a collaborative model across a C-suite, but it really does need to belong in CX. Like that, it's your work. And so you need to own those components of your work. Last thing too, I'll just say this. If I could add one more thing, it's just reversibility. If a decision is hard to reverse, like closing an account or denying a claim, that's where you got to be careful by letting AI be the final authority. In that gaming space, that's what killed us, man. If terms of service violation, you close somebody's account who's been building that account for 2 years. Like we had people that would social engineer the name of the agent who canceled the account, go to their house and literally confront them. I had letters show up at my house that were not postmarked. They were literally dropped off, like from customers that were frustrated. So, this is a reality. This is the world we live in. So you always have to be careful. But this aligns with broader ideas of trustworthy AI risk management and frameworks such as NIST, AI, RMF. Sorry, I always get that backwards. There's a ton of data on this, and I'm happy to provide Laura and the team some great resources for those who might be interested in getting up to speed on some of the current ISO models and certifications and governance models for companies that are looking to implement AI into CX. But there's a lot of resources available. So I will stop there.
Thanks, Jason.
Hmm.
One another question, just a couple of sentences for each of you, starting with Luis. what's one interaction type you believe should never be fully automated in 2026 and why?
Yeah, I think we're gonna sound like broken record with Jason today
Yeah.
on this topic. I go back to what Jason said, and it's spot on, right? I think about my parents. They're older. They're really seniors. They don't shy away from technology, but they like to talk to people when there is a hardship, when there is
Mhm.
financial and emotional aspect of it. They won't talk to a machine if it has to do with their health and if it has to do with their finances. They will talk to a human every time, and I think that is a one aspect that will should not be fully automated until we start getting the transactional aspect right. The moment that a customer says, yeah, they're struggling, they're scared, they're unsure, in my opinion, that's not a place for full automation. You can automate the gathering of the information and other things around it, but not the decision making, right? AI can support the agent, but it shouldn't make the decisions. Those moments define whether they really trust the brand, and the trust should exist long after the case is solved, or they shouldn't, and they will go to a different brand or a different company.
Exactly. It's hard for me to answer this because I almost feel like there isn't an absolute right here. I worked with a client super recently who is implementing a mental health solution in partnership with your PCP. So when you go in, let's say you get diagnosed with cancer, before you even leave their office, they're going to try to connect you to a therapist so that you can speak to them because you're prone to have depression or issues related to this diagnosis, right? So there's certain triggers that will cause people to need therapy or mental health. And so that's what they're building a solution for. And one of the first things I discovered is super sympathetic agents, great administrators, they're taking that initial contact with the patient and they're trying to schedule the appointment for the therapist to meet with them. And we all, in our soul of souls, especially if you work in CX, have that core of empathy. And what I found is they were spending way too much time acting as therapists, which is a huge governance and security risk. And so, in fact, in this case, automating this and making it an AI integrated solution would fix that. Like literally just saying, hey, look, I'm just here to schedule your appointment. I'm not going to discuss your therapy with you. I'm not able to do that. And just getting them in front of a therapist, that's a great solution. So in that case, it's almost the opposite, right? So you really have to determine what is the requirement that you're trying to meet in that specific customer interact. What is the customer journey? What needs to happen at each point? Where does AI work? Where does it not work? Back to what Luis says. And you have to also differentiate your customer type. Like Luis said, you're going to get folks that are older, and those may need a very different journey than your teenager, right? So really get to know your archetypes, get to know what you're trying to accomplish, map all of that against the customer journey, figure out where it makes sense to use AI, and then lock down the security processes around it.
Amen to that, Jason.
Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you, Luis and Jason. Excellent insights. If there is one takeaway for today, it's this: as AI gets smarter, trust has to become more engineered, not assumed. The winners in 2026 won't just be the teams with the most automation. They'll be the teams that can prove safety, protect privacy, and respond fast when things go wrong, and still deliver a human experience customers believe in. So thank you both for your time today. Let's see, we don't have any questions. I know we're right at time. If anyone does have any, I believe they'll be answered offline. So we will wrap it up and make sure that everyone can move on to their next thing. But thank you so much for your time today, both of you.
Thank you.
Hey, you bet. It was a privilege. Thank you so much.
You as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. What a day this has been. Thank you to all of our incredible speakers and panelists who shared their expertise, experiences, and honest insights with us today. So another special thank you to Chris Arnold, Jason Scott, and all of our panelists, AJ Gupta, Martin Hobrat, Jim Rembach, and Luis Carrillo for contributing to what has been a truly valuable conversation. And to our audience, thank you for your engagement, your questions, and for being part of this important dialogue about the future of contact centers in the AI era. And again, just to highlight the key pieces from today's event, AI is not just replacing the human touch, it's amplifying it when implemented thoughtfully. Legacy CX and AI systems that don't deliver must be replaced with solutions that work. The BPO landscape is being transformed by AI. Adaptation is essential, not optional. The future belongs to leaders who can balance automation with empathy. Security, privacy, and trust are non-negotiable in the age of intelligent CX. And the shift is happening now, and the opportunity is for those who act strategically. As we close, I encourage you to stay connected with Tech Summit for future events, where we'll continue exploring the latest technologies, trends, and strategies shaping contact centers. Thank you all for joining us today. Until next time, stay curious, stay adaptive, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Take care, everyone, and goodbye.